What is up, everybody? Chris of Midlife Crisis Media here. Welcome to another Film Collection 2024 live stream about even more 4K UHD box sets that I have in my physical media collection. This will be the final episode about the 4K box sets. Next week, we'll start going on to the individual 4K films that I have in my collection. Have another few stacks here to talk about. Hopefully it doesn't run over 2 hours again. I always say I don't plan on talking that much about these movies, but I have memories of some of these films, and I sometimes get carried away telling the stories. I apologize, but that's what happens. Like I said, I'm way more of a film fan than a video game fan. I can talk way more about films than games. So, sorry. Anyway, let me adjust this just slightly. Okay, so last time I ended with the Psycho sequel collection on 4K, and that was the end of the P's. Now we're going to move into the R's. But before I do that, why do I do these streams? There's 4 reasons. Mondane would agree. It's fun. I get to talk to awesome people while I'm doing this. It's good content for the channel, and it gives me a visual record of everything in my collection just in case something bad happens. Protection. Anyway, so start off with, I apologize for having to wear the hat. And sometimes you hear when like Texas or certain southern states get like a snow out of nowhere when they normally don't ever have snow, and like it just shuts the state down. In my area, once the first drop of rain hits the ground, everybody is like, I'm going to die, and drive 3 miles an hour. So it took me forever to get home tonight because it's slightly raining out right now. Anyway, rant over. Starting out with Reservoir Dogs. This is one of those pretty awesome Lionsgate steel books that I was getting at Best Buy when they were still carrying films. The cool thing about this one is, well, I don't know if it's cool, but I was looking for this one on Black Friday, the year that it was released, because it came out, I want to say, a week or two before Black Friday, 2021, 2022, something like that. And went there, went to the local Best Buy, went to 2 local Best Buys looking for this, couldn't find it. Eventually, I just said, I guess I'm not going to get it. It's probably sold out. There's probably limited quantities, whatever. So I ended up just going to Amazon and ordering the standard 4K edition. Got that in the mail. A couple weeks later, go to Best Buy again to see what they have, and there are copies of this sitting on the shelves. And I was like, damn it, I should have just waited. Ended up buying this. Luckily, I had not opened the other Reservoir Dogs copy I bought from Amazon, sent it back, got a refund. And I'm happy that I have this one in my collection. And what's cool about this? Well, this is one where there's something cool going on when you remove the plastic slip cover. So here it's a picture of the cop that gets captured in the film and tortured. And you can see that he's like, he's kind of bloody, which is something else. I'm surprised that this was okay to put on shelves in front of kids. I mean, this guy is like beaten up. I mean, he's gushing blood from his head. And the other cool thing is the blood makes the 5 main characters from the film, which is rad as hell. But when you remove this, it removes his ear and shows you the title of the movie. Also on the back, it does not really that impressive, but on the back, just a picture of the main characters, and you remove this, and it's like the rest of the picture with this cop. But it's still pretty cool. The discs actually have pictures of like different guns on it. Anyway, so Quentin Tarantino's first movie. I remember hearing about it a little bit back when it was first released in like 92, I want to say, and didn't really have any interest in it. My dad, on the other hand, rented it and brought it back, or watched it. And it was one of those movies where my dad all of a sudden had to share his love of it with everybody. Anybody that would come over to the house, he'd be like, hey, have you seen Reservoir Dogs? We should watch it. And he would do that with everybody. He did it with my uncle when he came to visit. He did it with me. He did it with my brother, even though this is, crime movies, action movies, like I say, are stuff that we were allowed to watch as a kid, but horror movies were off limits. Even if it was a sci-fi R-rated movie, it was fine. As long as it wasn't like a Jason or a Freddy movie, we were allowed to watch it. So I was kind of surprised that my dad wanted to sit there and watch this movie with me, because it's kind of uncomfortable at times. But it's a crime film about a heist gone wrong. It's kind of told out of order from different perspectives of different people. And it's got a lot of surprising twists. The acting in it is fantastic. It's written extremely well. It kind of started a subgenre in crime films where everything is kind of told out of order. It kind of became Quentin Tarantino's calling card, kind of like his signature thing was tell the story out of order, and then at the very end, it all kind of comes together. He showed this to me, surprisingly, and I was like, damn, I've never seen anything like that before. I want more from this guy. So when Pulp Fiction, his next movie, came out, I made a big effort to get out and see it opening day, and did not disappoint. I ended up seeing that in the theater like 2 or 3 times. Absolutely love it. It's a great movie. It's actually kind of a remake of a Hong Kong film, or a ripoff, if you ask some people, of a Hong Kong film. I cannot remember the name of it. But it's basically the exact same thing. A group of people or criminals are stuck in this one location while they're waiting for the cops to, lighten up their search for them. And they all end up like fighting amongst themselves and end up killing everybody, or killing each other one by one kind of thing. But it's a good movie. Here's another Steelbook, one of my favorite movies by Arnold, and that is The Running Man. I saw this at the Dollar Theater as a kid. We never really ran out to see Arnold movies back then. He was still considered at that point in time like a B movie star. Like all the movies he made were like schlock. Conan, the Conan movies were considered kind of schlocky. Even though the first one was, I would say, a little bit more A tier, but like the second one especially was kind of schlocky. The first Terminator was like a big hit, but it was like relegated to the schlock like subcategory and all that, but it's way smarter than it has any right to be. But like Red Heat, all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until he did like Total Recall and T2 did he become like the A tier star that we all know him and remember him as. So we weren't really like actively going out to see his movies when they would come out. I mean, if there was one playing at the Dollar Theater, like I said, we would be like, oh, the new Arnold movie's playing at the Dollar Theater. You guys want to go and see it? We're like, yeah, sure, whatever. So this was one of them. And this was one that we took my grandmother to see. And my grandmother had a huge crush on Arnold. So pretty much the entire movie, all I heard next to me was, oh my, oh my. Every time he was on screen, she just had the hots for him. But this is based on a Stephen King short story. It's like a dystopian future where everything's run by big business and the government. And there's this game show where criminals are let loose in this, like, I don't know, citywide arena, and they're hunted down by basically like stage bosses from video games. And Arnold escapes from prison. He's been like falsely accused of mass murder. He's been put in prison. He escapes, gets recaptured, and thrown into this game show. And it's him basically against the system, coming back and clearing his name and stopping this BS from continuing. And it's a really fun movie. It is like super fast paced. Richard Dawson, that hosted the Family Feud back in the 80s, is the villain in this, and he is looking like he's having the time of his life playing a real son of a bitch. And like the moment where he gets his comeuppance is pretty awesome. All the bosses that I talk about, they're called stalkers. Here are all kind of like themed. Like one is like a flamethrower guy. One guy carries on a chainsaw. One guy sings opera while shooting electricity bolts. One guy's an ice skater, and uses like a bladed hockey stick. It's just a ton of fun. It's stupid, but it puts a smile on my face, and there's a ton of quotable lines in it from Arnold, which is great. And it has a pretty fun soundtrack by Harold Faltermeyer, who did the Beverly Hills Cop scores. And while this is a steelbook, it doesn't have anything crazy going on like those Lionsgate releases they do. But you take this off, and it just has a different image. And that's the giant screen where the characters bet on who's going to make the next kill in the game. Super fun movie. I watch it at least once a year. It's just one of those movies I put on when like I don't want to think about it too much. I just want to put something on that's fun. It's going to take my mind off of whatever's going on. Next up is a duo of films. I bought this while laying in bed on an air mattress at Church the Game Grinder's place in Minnesota. I went up to visit for the weekend. It was like right after COVID, kind of like all the restrictions lined up. So I want to say it was like the end of 2020. End of 2020, or 2021? I don't remember. I think it was the end of 2020. Anyway, so I'm laying in bed or on this air mattress, and I can't sleep. So I remember a bunch of people online and Movie Tom, who had come to visit the night that I bought this, bringing up that Vinegar Syndrome was having like it was right after Thanksgiving. That was why I left and I went on Black Friday. So I think it was Black Friday of 2020. That Vinegar Syndrome was having like a Black Friday sale all weekend. And I remember like a few weeks before I had went to visit church, I had looked at the website, and there was really nothing on the website that I was interested in at all. But since I'm laying in bed, and like Tom had just brought it up, a few hours earlier while he was hanging out with all of us, I was laying in bed. I'm like, oh, maybe I'll see if they have anything. I'll just check again. Maybe something new came out within the last few days. And I look, and then I saw that this was discounted for the sale, and I was just kind of like, of all the things to upscale to 4K, these, I'm like, I gotta have that. Click buy, and that is the Scanner Cop and Scanner Cop 2 box set. You can see them both right there. These are spin-offs of the Scanners films. So there was Scanners 1 through 3. That was like the main line. And then they kind of spun off into this Scanner Cop thing, and it only lasted for 2 movies. And these were direct-to-video. And the thing was, Scanner Cop 1, I did rent. They had it at the video store that I worked at, or I eventually worked at. And I rented it, and I was like, that was really kind of cool. Like, it took, like, what were trying to be, like, serious science fiction horror movies and trying not to be cheesy, even though they kind of were movies, and kind of tried to just turn it into, like, a silly, fun little thing. Like, it's like if Michael Bay got his hands on Scanners and just decided to turn it into, like, this roller coaster ride thing instead of, like, trying to be serious and have a story and all that. It's just silliness happening. So that's the first Scanner Cop film. I can't remember this guy's name. Something Arnold or Andrews, something like that. Daniel Quinn. remember I saw him on an episode of Star Trek Enterprise or something. He's like the main character. He's a scanner. He just became like a beat cop, and he's been trying to keep his powers hidden. And turns out there's a couple of evil scanners out there. One of them is this lady right here who was also on Deep Space Nine. She was one of the augments that Dr. Bashir is friends with. She's the one who is like overly stimulated sexually all the time. She also played the villain in Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. And he ends up having to use his powers in order to, serve justice, which is the cheese part of it, where he's just kind of like, yep, I'm a cop, and I'm going to invade your mind and make your head explode kind of thing. There's no consequences, is there? And it's just really, really fun. I really enjoyed it. I need to watch it again. I have not even opened it. And I bought this like years ago, and I have not even opened it, but I will eventually get the urge. But then there's the sequel that also went direct to video called Scanner Cop 2, The Showdown. The Takeover is the third film. And I've never seen this one. It has Daniel Quinn in it again. That's him in the front. And Patrick Kilpatrick, who you've probably seen in 500 movies as a villain, also was on Star Trek Deep Space Nine in arguably the best episode they ever did. It was like the siege on AR 12345 or something like that. He was one of the soldiers that was stranded on that planet. That's probably one of the best episodes. It's the one where Nog loses his leg. Is the villain. And I hear that it is not very good, which is why I've never watched it. But I will, like I say, eventually get the urge to pop both of these in and see what they're all about. And I can't complain because it was cheap as all hell for a box set that comes with like this hard cardboard outer shell. Got some weird imagery of some shenanigans that happened in the movie or movies. And yeah, these are, well, at least the first one I remember being pretty fun. So there's that. Like I said, it was cheap. Get a couple of entertaining films out of it. Next up, we have, I still have not watched this, and you're gonna laugh when you see what it is. But I bought this. I was talking about it, I think, the last stream, that there was this line of Universal, what are they calling them? Essential Collection, I think they called it. And like I bought the Big Lebowski on Amazon, and it's part of that collection. Originally, I guess the idea was that it was just going to be that, and to see if that sold, and if that did sell, they would make more in that series. And I guess what happened was it did sell quite a bit. So Universal was like, "Hey, we'll make a bunch more of these essential collection editions of certain movies in Universal's catalog, but now you can only get it on their website, Groove." And I saw Serial at Midnight talking about all of the ones that had been released, and out of all of them, there was like 4 that I wanted. So I ended up going there and picking them all up. One of them was Schindler's List. Spielberg made this directly after finishing up Jurassic Park. Like, Jurassic Park came out in like May. It was either May or June of 93, and then this came out in December of 93. He went straight from this fun movie about dinosaurs eating people to something about, World War II and the Nazis. So fun to sad and depressing. And it's one of those reasons why I've never actually watched it. I don't want to watch something that is intentionally going to depress me and remind me of bad things that have happened in history. But everyone tells me that the movie is freaking fantastic. So I was like, all right, if I'm going to buy it, this is probably going to be the last generation of physical media we're going to get. Nothing's probably going to go past 4K. I don't think there's a disc big enough that can hold 8K movies on it. So I'm like, might as well just get it now. So you got the movie in this hard shell case. The title is embossed in metallic, which is pretty awesome. Has some great artwork on it, really simplistic, and I like that. Here is the film, which is the original poster art right there with the hands. A couple of discs, actually 3 discs. So you got the movie on 4K, the movie on Blu-ray, and another Blu-ray that is dedicated specifically to all the extras. And it also has a booklet in here. Oh, it's about the Shoah Foundation. Okay. And then it also comes with some extras. All of these essential collections come with some extras. So you got a bunch of lobby cards. I'm not going to open that up. I have a card that tells me it's a certificate of authenticity. I have copy 3,467 out of 5,000. Like I said, they only made limited numbers of these, which is why I jumped on them when I did, because I was like, if I miss out on this, I'm going to kick myself later. And then it also comes with a film cell, and that's the scene of the little girl standing in front of all the Nazi soldiers. So the movie's in black and white, and every once in a while there's little splashes of color in there for effect, and one of them is that little girl's red coat. The movie also comes with this booklet with some background information of the movie. I need to watch this. Maybe I'll try to watch it this weekend. I always say that I will, and then I never do. But based on a true story about some guy who was in with the Nazis, who was actually helping Jews escape from Nazi Germany somewhere. I don't know where exactly. So I need to watch that eventually. But then there's this. Here's another random movie that Vinegar Syndrome was like, you know what? We need to upgrade that to 4K, and people are going to buy it like you would not believe, and I'm pretty sure they did. But it's considered to be one of the worst movies ever made, and I don't care. I think this movie is kind of fantastic in that so bad it's good way, and that is Showgirls. This was one of the first, I want to say one of the only NC-17 movies to ever make money. They've released a handful of NC-17 movies. You know, it was introduced like in the beginning of the 90s. I think it was Harold or something in Maude. It was some movie with Fred Ward in it. That was like, I guess there was too much sex in it to get it an R rating, and it would have gotten an X. So they created NC-17 because it wasn't quite porn. But I've known of maybe 6 movies total that have been rated NC-17. This is the only one that got like a pretty wide theatrical release and made some money, but it did not make enough money to make back the budget, but it did make money. It's directed by Paul Verhoeven, who directed the first RoboCop, Total Recall, Basic Instinct, Starship Troopers, The Hollow Man. And he decided at one point, he's like, I'm going to push the envelope of what can get away with in a movie when it comes to sex and nudity, and decided to do this. And it's written by the same guy who wrote Basic Instinct, although it does not show a deft hand at anything any of the talent that he showed in the Basic Instinct script. And it's basically about a bipolar girl who decides, I'm going to go to Vegas, become a Las Vegas showgirl, and ends up fucking people to the top. And we're not just talking about using sex. We're also talking fucking people over to get to the top. And it's so bad. It's hysterically funny. I love the box that this comes in. It's another one of those hard cases, and it has a magnet in it to keep it sealed. There's some artwork in there that's a little risque. There's no actual nudity here, so we're okay. That's the artwork of, what's his name? James, the character that befriends Nomi, the main character of the movie, and decides, I'm going to do an art house dance revival thing. And that's the pamphlet that he was handing out to everybody to show what it was. And it was not anything to write home about when you actually see it happen. But here is the movie in a pretty cool slip. And you open it up, and it has the original theatrical artwork. 3 discs, movie on Blu-ray, movie on 4K, and a bonus Blu-ray with all the extras on it. And it also comes with a booklet with, I wouldn't really say stories. There's a couple of pages with some stuff written on it, but it's mostly just pictures of the characters and all that. There's one of Nomi where she was like, I'm a star. Yeah, you still suck. So I remember when the movie came out, the trailers used the Tracy Lords song that was played in the Mortal Kombat movie during the Reptile and Liu Kang fight. And that was what got my attention. I was like, oh, I love that piece of music. That's awesome. I should go and see it. Never did. It kind of disappeared pretty fast from the theaters, so I never got a chance to see it. Watched it on home video. By then I was working at the video store, and we got the screener tapes in. And so the movie was released theatrically NC-17, but when it came to home video, there was an R-rated cut and an NC-17 cut. And I want to say we were given the NC-17 cut as a screener. So my boss gave it to me to watch, and I was like, I will gladly take this home and watch it. And when I came back, the next day with it, my boss was like, so how many copies of it should we buy? And I was just kind of like, I really don't know. Like, I think we ended up with 4 copies of it. And we bought 4 copies of the NC-17 and 2 copies of the R. And we put like big labels on them to say that this is the NC-17 and this is the R-rated cut. And it rented quite a bit, obviously, because everybody wants to see some boobs and all that kind of stuff. So the movie is like really bad. All the characters are written like they're bipolar. Everyone is an asshole. No one is likable. And the dancing, it's about showgirls, Las Vegas showgirls dancing. Nobody can dance in this damn movie at all, especially the main character. Her version of dancing is having a seizure. There's a couple of scenes where she's giving lap dances, especially the one that's in the pool, where you can't even see anything that's going on because she is thrashing around so much and kicking up so much water. You can't even see what's really going on. But I have watched this more times than I probably care to admit, mostly for the podcasts that I do. So the movie starting podcast that I do now, we watched it with Kira Lee. And then we watched it on the previous iteration of my podcast, which was back then called Van Damme That's Good. And a bunch of burlesque dancers came over to my place and watched it with me and my co-host. They one of the burlesque dancers, I think it was Deja Sue, she brought her copy of the movie over to watch, and she had bought like this special edition DVD copy that came with a big cutout of Nomi, of the main character played by Elizabeth Berkley, who was on Saved by the Bell. Big cutout of her. And she put it in the corner of the room, and she's like, I want Nomi to watch us watching her. And I was like, that's awesome. And it was a really fun episode to record. But like every time I watch, it's like the first time I watched it, I was like, that was terrible. And then every time I've watched it, I've gained a little bit more appreciation. It is not badly made, like technically. It's just that all the acting choices and like the script is terrible. And it's just like, it becomes like more of a camp classic every single time I watch it. So, yep. And next up, we have the Spider-Man trilogy. This is the original Tobey Maguire films. I like the first 2, and I'm not a fan of this third one at all. So I look like I am sliding. I am sitting up straight, but I look like I am sliding down my chair. I remember the hype for the first movie was just like, you would not believe that original trailer where Spider-Man traps that helicopter within a web that was spun between the 2 towers of the World Trade Center. And then not too long after, 9/11 happens, and that trailer had to be pulled to stop reminding people of the World Trade Center. Even though it was a fantastic trailer or a teaser trailer. But like when the movie came out, I remember seeing it opening night with a group of friends. One of them had no knowledge of Spider-Man like at all. And it was like an event. Like that place was on fire. It was like everyone was super excited, super hyped, and like everybody seemed to love it. There was like cheering happening and stuff. It was super fun. Second one was a little more subdued. I went and saw it with one of my ex-girlfriends and a couple of my friends. And when it was over, everyone was just kind of like, yeah, that was cool. And I don't know if it was that, like for me, I was like, there was so much more cheesy shit going on in the second movie. Especially with like the Uncle Ben coming back and that vision and telling Peter, you're still doing good, boy. You got to get that dick running again if you want to get your web shooters working kind of thing. Because Peter has like an existential, flaccid crisis in the second one. And he can't spin webs anymore because he's so sad, so sad. He's got the arachnid dysfunction. And it just, for some reason, it just like rubbed me the wrong way. I was like, it felt like the exact same thing that the first movie was. At the very end, Mary Jane gets kidnapped again and is held hostage. And Spider-Man's gonna go rescue her. And like, Peter has like a connection to the bad guy. And, oh no, you're still got good in you, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, whatever. I mean, it was good, but I didn't think it was as good as the first. The third one, on the other hand, me and a couple of friends went and saw it opening night. And you could have heard a pin drop in that theater when that movie was over. Like everyone just kind of like walked out with their heads down. Like nobody was impressed by it. You could just tell like nobody liked it. And then my friends and I, when the movie was over, went to a Denny's next door to the theater to have something to eat. And like we still weren't talking. And then eventually I just kind of said, like, kind of under my breath, I was like, yeah, that sucked, didn't it? Everyone was like, yeah. Too many characters to keep track of, too many villains, too many stupid subplots. Like, Gwen Stacy did not need to be in this movie at all. Venom did not need to be in this movie at all. We already had two villains set up. We had the Sandman, and you had the Return of the Green Goblin, you know, with James Franco's character's name. I can never remember his name. But like then all of a sudden, like Venom just kind of shows up, and it's just like, yeah, whatever. Save that for another movie, dude. But yeah, too many villains, too many characters to keep track of, and it's just like the whole evil emo Peter Parker thing is so dumb, if you ask me, and is handled in such a hokey way. And it's because Sam Raimi didn't want to have any of that stuff in the movie. He was just prepared to have, you know, the Return of the Green Goblin and Sandman as the villains, and like Venom was forced upon him. So you can tell he had no interest in any of that stuff, and it shows in the film because it's done in such a dumb way. And you can also tell that the actors look like they were kind of done with it too, because Tobey Maguire and I almost said Claire Danes. Oh God, what's her freaking name? I cannot remember her damn name. The one with the teeth. Shit. Oh my God, what is her goddamn name? Kirsten Dunst. Why did I blank on that? I don't know. Like, you can tell, like, the two of them are kind of like, we're done. Like, this is the last one we're going to do. Like, we are just done with this. And then once again, it ends in the same way where Mary Jane gets kidnapped and held hostage, and Peter has to go and save her. And then there's a villain where he's like, you're still not good, bad. You got some good in you. Shut up. It's like every time it's the same shit. But then on rewatch, I really liked part 2 even more. Like, part 2 stands out to me as like almost as good as X2 when it comes to superhero films. Like, it is damn near perfect. Part 1 has kind of a little slid down a little bit in the rankings for me. It's like I see now that one as the one that's a little too cheesy, and the third one I don't even talk about. But had to have that. Will I buy the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man films? Probably not. Couldn't stand the first Amazing Spider-Man to the point where when the second one came out, I never bothered to watch it, and I still haven't. Here we have a 4K and 3D Blu-ray set of Spider-Man Far From Home. This is the second Spider-Man movie in the MCU. This is one where Jake Gyllenhaal is playing Mysterio. And this one is a lot of fun. I like all of the Marvel or the MCU Spider-Man movies. I think they're all fun. I think Tom Holland is a fantastic Spider-Man. He's super charismatic, and he is immensely watchable, and he is super fun, and he seems like a really cool guy in real life too when you see the interviews with him. And I pretty much like the entire cast. Like, what's her damn name? See, now I'm blanking on names. It's because I'm tired. Shit. What's her name? I almost called her Aquafina. Oh man, I am blanking. What's her goddamn name? I cannot remember her goddamn name. The one who plays Mary Jane. Shit. I'll keep on wanting to call her Aquafina, but that's not it. Anyway, I like the whole cast. Battleon, the one who plays Spider-Man's best friend, he's fantastic. And Jake Gyllenhaal is a great Mysterio. I like the fact that at least the first two movies, the third one kind of went in a different direction, but in a good way. But the first two movies, the villains are disgruntled employees of Stark. And I thought that was really cool because in the first one, in Homecoming, you have the Vulture, who was on the cleanup crew from the Avengers movie. They were cleaning up New York from all the stuff from the Chitauri invasion. And then, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. comes in and says, yeah, this stuff's all classified. You guys you're done. We're going to have our own people do it. And he's like, yeah, but this is what we've been hired for. Like, all these people are, you're taking away our jobs. How are we going to eat? And, like, it's him getting revenge for that. And then in this one, it's, Jake Gyllenhaal plays a dude who used to work for Stark and basically got fired, and all of his tech was stolen by Stark. And he's trying to get revenge and using that tech against everybody, which is pretty rad. But really like this one. It was the movie that came out like right after Endgame. Like Endgame hit. Was that what it was? Yeah, because the blip had been reversed, and this was the first movie that dealt with everybody coming back. Next up, some of my favorites. Gotta talk about this. The Star Trek Original Motion Picture Collection. So this has the first 6 Star Trek films that contain the original crew of the show, the original show. So Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, Sulu, Chekhov, Scotty. And I don't know why they did it like this, but they decided to like split it into 2 different cases. Like one of them is the 4Ks, and the other one is the Blu-rays with all the extras and stuff on it. Why don't you just mix the 2 of them together? I don't know why you had to separate it. Something's broken in here. This one is I probably like more movies in this series of the Star Trek films than others. So you got Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is probably the first movie I remember seeing in the theater. I want to say I saw Star Wars first, but I don't like. I was told I saw a re-release of Star Wars. My parents didn't think in '77 so at that point I was probably like 1.5, 2, and my parents didn't think that I would be able to handle all the loud noises in the theater, so they didn't want to take me to see it because I'd probably be crying and screaming and whatever. I wouldn't be able to sit still. I don't know. But my dad told me like years ago that he took me to see a re-release in '78, and I sat perfectly still. I kind of have memories of seeing it in the theater, but not like concrete memories. I do have concrete memories of seeing Star Trek: The Motion Picture in '79. My parents took me to see it because my parents were both huge Trek fans. And I do remember being bored out of my skull and falling asleep. Because this came out probably when I want to say it came out in December, so I was 4 years old at that point. And I remember passing out and my parents waking me up when it was over. So the first one is trying to be like 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's trying to be beautiful and try to have like these deep meanings and all this kind of stuff. But the thing is, the TV show that the movie is based on was kind of like a Western in outer space. You have people doing fist fights, and there's space battles and all this kind of shit. There's intrigue. There's people spying on each other. And here it's like everybody's quiet. Nobody talks above a certain tone of voice. Everybody moves real slow. Things just kind of happen at their own pace. I'm like, no, this isn't the feeling of the TV show. Like I love Robert Wise, the guy who directed Day the Earth Stood Still, The Haunting, like West Side Story. Like the dude was talented. He made movies that won Oscars. Was the wrong person to direct this movie because he didn't know anything about Star Trek at all. And it kind of shows when you watch the movie because of the tone of the whole thing. It's completely wrong. But, like I said, the movie is beautiful to look at. It is filmed extremely well. The special effects still hold up. I think the movie has one of the best scores of all time from Jerry Goldsmith. I mean, who does not know the theme from Star Trek: The Motion Picture? Because it's what they used as the theme for Star Trek: The Next Generation. It looks great. And it does have a cool story. I just think it's told in kind of a weird way that doesn't feel like Star Trek. But this also has the theatrical cut and the director's edition. So the movie was... okay, I'll try to summarize this as best I can. The original movie had a locked-in release date in like December of 1979. And the thing was, the people that they hired to do the special effects did not know what the hell they were doing. And they just kept putting off producing shots until like the last minute. Like they had like 4 months left before the release date, and they had no shots in the can. So they found out what's going on. They're like, what is going on? These people are like, we don't know what we're supposed to be doing. We don't know if any of this stuff is going to work. So they're like, you're fired. And they went and hired everybody that worked on Star Wars that was available and had them quickly pump out shots like you would not believe. The book that I read, they were doing a 24-hour rotation at the special effect house. Like there would be an 8-hour shift of people that would work there. They would go home. Another shift would come in. It was constantly pumping stuff out 24 hours a day just so they can meet the deadline, and they still didn't make it. So the movie was technically released unfinished. There were a couple of special effects shots that were unfinished, and you can tell because they look kind of wonky, and they just kind of like stop, like the shot where the Enterprise is approaching the cloud for the first time, and the cloud is attacking them with those electrical bolts that were vaporizing everything. So the first shot hits the Enterprise, the shields are able to take the shot or take the hit, but Scotty's like, well, if they hit us again, we're done because our shields are basically kaput. So there's like this countdown. Spock's trying to figure out how to contact the cloud, and it's like until the last second, Spock starts to transmit. They show the shot. The shot is shown through the view screen. You see the bolt coming toward the screen, and then it just goes boop and disappears. That was supposed to be a bigger shot to show like it fizzle out or something. They just couldn't finish the shot in time, and they just like, well, that's what we got. We're going to use it. And also the editing had not been completed. So there were some shots that lingered a little too long, or things were just edited in a weird way. But the director's edition, they went back and recut the movie the way that Robert Wise wanted to, because that was done in like 2001 originally. And they made new special effects with CGI to finish up the shots that were never finished. And they made them as close to what the original film looked like as they possibly could. They did not want to draw attention to the effects, kind of like the way Lucas did with the re-releases of Star Wars, the special editions. They were trying to mimic the original movie as much as they possibly could and not draw attention to itself. But because that was rendered in, 480p or whatever, whatever a DVD, runs at resolution-wise, it took them forever to get off their asses to redo it in 4K, which is what they did here. And it looks fantastic. They re-released it in theaters over here. I went and saw it. It looks great. Movie makes a little bit more sense, but it's still not what you want in a Star Trek movie. And I understand why it has some haters. But what's up, Retro Coop? Part 2, though, goes back to what the TV show is. And that's my favorite Star Trek film, bar none. Wrath of Khan, everything about it is fantastic. Another great score, this time by James Horner. One of his first big scores got him noticed. Without Star Trek II, the motion picture, or without Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, you would have never had that score for Aliens or Titanic or Avatar or anything that he did after that. I think he's a fantastic composer. Special effects were all done by Industrial Light and Magic, George Lucas's company. The script was on point, brought back a villain from the show, and it actually is talking about weapons of mass destruction and all that kind of stuff, and sacrificing yourself for your friends and all that. And it had a kicker of an ending. And absolutely love it. I watch it at least once a year, and it looks fantastic on 4K. And they have the director's cut of that on here as well in 4K. Makes more sense to that scene where Scotty brings that random dude to the bridge after Khan's first attack on the Enterprise. It's just like Khan is like, or Scotty's just kind of like, I brought this dead guy to the bridge, guys. And everyone's like, oh, why? You find out that that's Scotty's nephew in the director's cut. So naturally, he's upset. My favorite Star Trek movie ever. I could watch that any day. Then we have part 3, The Search for Spock, which is the continuation of part 2. And the thing is, 2, 3, and 4 ended up becoming this unofficial trilogy within the 6 films that were a continuous storyline. So it was, what's it called? I can't remember the name of what it is when Deep Space Nine was considered something storytelling, where it's one continuous long story. I can't remember. Anyway. So yeah, part 3 picks up right where part 2 left off. Spock's dead. And Kirk finds out that he might not be dead. Got to go back to Genesis to find him. And it turns into this whole big epic thing. It's good. I like it. I think it's a really fun movie. Leonard Nimoy, wanted to get out of Star Trek. And then because of his character being killed off in 2, which is what he wanted, because he wanted out of the series, when Paramount came back to say, hey, we want you to come back for part 3, he was like, I'll only do it if you let me direct, because he'd been wanting to direct something for a while. He realized he had backed them into a corner, and he had leverage now. And he's like, I'll come back if you let me direct part 3. And they're like, okay, fine. And he ended up doing a great job, I think. Although part 3, if you thought part 2 was dark, part 3 is even darker. It deals with some heavy shit. And then we have part 4, which is, if you ask me, one of the worst movies in the series. I know it's considered it's one of the ones that made the most amount of money, the most amount of profit in the series. It's considered one of the best movies in the series because of the tonal change, which is why I have an issue with it. I just don't like it. I really don't. I was like, you have these 2 movies back to back, which this is a continuation of, that were dark and dealt with death and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, this fourth movie is like all puppies and rainbows and has like this Irish jig sounding musical score where it's all poppy, poppy, poppy. And yeah, the whole going back in time thing is cool and all, but it's like all dumb jokes and like, oh, look, Chekhov bumped his head and now we got to do a random black op to bust him out of that hospital. Hijinks. And I just can't stand it. I really don't. I watch it and I cringe. I'm like, I wanted, like, if this was supposed to be like this trilogy within the series, I wanted them to feel connected. And this one feels so unconnected from the first two, if you ask me. So I'm not a fan. I hate the music in the movie. I absolutely hate it. If you've ever listened to Leonard Rosenman's music before, all of his scores sound the same. His score for Star Trek 4 sounds exactly like his score to RoboCop 2. Except in RoboCop 2, you have a choir going, RoboCop! But it sounds exactly the same. So I'm not a big fan. Did not prepare me for how bad Part 5 would be. So Leonard Nimoy directed Part 4, and I guess that made William Shatner kind of jealous. So in order for William Shatner to act in Star Trek 4, he said, you have to let me direct Part 5. And they were like, fine. So he got to direct Part 5. And the version he wanted to make sounded pretty cool, but the budget got slashed for whatever reason. Even though Part 4 made more money than any of the other films before it, they still slashed Part 5's budget. So it left him in a lurch. Couldn't do any of the things he wanted to do that were cool. Didn't have the money to hire any decent effect company because ILM was busy. They had done all the effects for 2, 3, and 4. They were busy, and because in the summer of 1989, ILM did Ghostbusters 2. There was like 3 movies: Indiana Jones and the Temple, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and one other movie. So they were not available at all. So he hired some random company that had done like 2 movies before, and the effects in the movie are freaking awful. They look worse than what's on television a lot of the time. The models are lit all wrong, and they look like toys. And like the whole traveling through the Great Barrier is basically like the liquid that you find in a glow stick dropped into water tanks. It's horrible looking. It looks so stupid. And the story is dumb. It's like, we're looking for God. I thought the whole idea behind the show that Roddenberry had set up was, there was no room for that kind of thing. But here it is. And it's just really bad. It's dumb jokes, bad script, bad plot, bad acting. The guy that plays the quote-unquote villain, who is like, that's another thing that pisses me off. Spock's like half-brother. And like when it gets brought up, Kirk is like, you never told me you had half-brother. And Spock's like, I didn't feel like I should talk about things of a personal nature. I'm like, your best fucking friends. Bullshit. So I'm not a fan of Part 5. And then you have Part 6, The Undiscovered Country, which was only made because Part 5 bombed. Part 5 bombed hard. And it almost killed the series. Dead. But Star Trek's 25th anniversary was coming up in 1991. And Paramount was like, hey, we'll make one last movie to kind of send the characters off. So here's some money. You're going to have the exact same amount of money we gave to William Shatner to make Part 5. So spend it well. And they brought back the guy who directed The Wrath of Khan. So he knew what was up. He wrote a really good story. They ended up dealing with like racism and like the Berlin Wall coming down kind of thing, just with Klingons and all that, and got ILM to come back and made a hell of a freaking awesome movie. And it was a great send-off for all the characters. Like Sulu got promoted to a captain of another ship, and every character gets something to do. A lot of action in it. There's like a mystery, even though it's completely predictable as to where it's going to go. And like at the very end of the movie, like the characters are retiring and the Enterprise is going to get decommissioned. And they stole this in Avengers Endgame. All the actors signed their names on screen as their like farewell thing. And they copied that in Avengers Endgame. So I love these. I love some of these films. I like the first. I love 3. I really like 3 of them. I like one of them okay, and I don't like 2 of them. And then that brings us to the Next Generation collection on 4K. And even though I watched more of the original cast films as a kid, obviously Next Generation hadn't come out yet, I do think of myself as more of a Next Generation fan because that's really where my Star Trek fandom took off. I liked the original series just fine. I used to watch it when I was a kid. Didn't really get what was going on in it because it's like, all the social commentary and stuff kind of went over my head as a kid. I didn't know what the hell the whole guys with one half black, one half white face, and the other people that are prejudiced against them have their sides of their faces reversed. And like, oh, it's all about racism. You watch it now, but back then I was just kind of like, their faces are reversed. It's like, okay. But growing up now, watching a Star Trek show that was being broadcast in my lifetime, I was like, Next Generation was my show. So I have more of an affinity for the characters of Next Generation and the movies that they're in. Although, so we have 4 movies in this series, starting off with Generations, which I'm not a fan of, even though I did see it like 7 or 8 times in the theater. I was so stoked that we were getting a Next Generation film, and it was like 6 months after the show ended its run. So the show was on for 7 years. It ended in the spring of 1994, and then in November of that year, the movie came out. It was nuts. So I was still hyped because of the show ending on a really high note. The final episode of Next Generation I thought was great. And all of a sudden now we've got a movie. I was like, this is fantastic. And it's bringing Kirk back, and we're going to have a Kirk-Picard team up. I'm totally there. I saw a sneak preview of it like 2 weeks before it opened, and I actually had to like call out of work. Like I told work, I'm like, I need to leave early today. I'm going to see the premiere of Star Trek Generations. And they're like, okay. And me and a couple of friends went, and it kind of confused me at first because I had forgotten some details of the show. So I was like, oh yeah, what was the deal with those Duras sisters again? Like I couldn't remember them all that much from the TV show because they only showed up in the show maybe 2 times. And there's a couple of other things. But I was like, for the most part, I was like, yeah, it was kind of cool. And then like when the movie was released, full on released, we went opening night with a bunch of friends. My brother made fun of a guy that was working at the theater who was dressed up in a Star Trek uniform that was probably 2 sizes too small for the guy. And my brother made fun of him. The guy like flipped out on him. But like all of my friends loved it. Everyone I was with loved it. And then I was like, okay, like I don't care if I don't remember the Duras sister crap. This is awesome. And I went and saw it every week for like 5 more weeks. And it was nuts how many times I couldn't. Now I think about it, I'm like, why did I do that? And it was just because I was so freaking stoked we got a Next Generation movie so soon after the show ended. The original movies came out like I think it was a decade after the show ended, and we got one from Next Generation like probably just immediately after. So I was super hyped. And then it came out on home video, and that's where I think it started to lose its luster. I'm like, okay. I've distanced myself from the film because I haven't seen it in a while since it came out theatrically, because back then the movies would come out like 6-7 months after the theatrical run ended on home video. So I hadn't seen it in a while, so I'm watching it again, and I'm like, yeah, that's kind of dumb. That's kind of dumb too. Why did that happen? That's stupid. Why is Kirk even here? Just like all the flaws started to pop up, and I was like, I don't like this. There's cool stuff in it. I like the little battle scene that we get between the Bird of Prey and the Enterprise getting destroyed and crashing on the planet. That stuff's all cool and all. I like the stuff in the Nexus. Picard gets to, have a family that he always wanted. I love the stuff that has to deal with his brother and his nephew dying. That scene where Picard like breaks down crying in front of Troy, I think is like one of the better Picard moments. And it's handled so well. And like when it comes to action stuff, the movie's fine. It's just that there's so much silly shit. Like, I like the idea of Data getting an emotions chip because that's what he has wanted the entire run of the show. And I get why they decided to finally do it in the movie, because they could do cool things with it now that they had a budget. But all it turned him into was like a really annoying stand-up comedian. And he is annoying as hell in the movie because of it. All he does is, like, the writers seem to think that having emotions just makes you crack jokes all the time, and bad ones at that, and imitate Macaulay Culkin. And like, I just don't like that. I hate it. I like Soren as a villain. I think he's a great emotional villain. And I think Malcolm McDowell plays him great. But if they just focused on making this the best Next Generation movie they could have, instead of trying to force all this original series stuff into it, I think we would have had a better movie. But they decided to do like a passing of the torch thing. And if you ask me, that kind of ruins it. And then you get the death of Kirk at the end, which is the way it's handled is really dumb. Yeah, a bridge falls on him. And the last word he has, oh my, and he dies. I'm like, okay, whatever. But it started off the franchise because it made a ton of money, and everyone's just like, okay, these characters are bankable theatrically. So 2 years later, we get First Contact, which is the big one about the Borg. And I love the Borg. I think all the Borg episodes of Next Generation are some of my favorites. But I don't really like First Contact. Why? Because of the Borg Queen. I think the Borg Queen was a bad idea. But you got to have a villain to fight in the movie. You can't just have faceless drones be your villain. That's not interesting. So they, of course, have to cook up a villain. So, the Borg are controlled by a Queen Bee. That's obviously individualized. That is not part of this collective, the way everybody is like, soldiers are emotionless. She's emotional and all that shit. I hate it. I hate the fact that they changed the Borg for the movie. They turned them into... They made them so not scary anymore that it was kind of comical to me. And it ruined everything Borg related after that, because after that, Voyager just ran the Borg into the ground with all the Queen shit. And I really hate that aspect of this movie. Not to say that the actor playing the Borg Queen was bad. I love her. I think she is fantastic. And she turned that part into something that's weird, sexy-wise. And it's kind of cool, but I just don't think the character was necessary. And a lot of the unnecessary comedy and stuff. But it does have that moment with Picard breaking all the shit in his ready room and freaking out on Alfre Woodard's character, doing the whole, like, the line must be drawn here. That scene is fantastic. There's a lot of great stuff in it. The whole scene of the walking on the ship's hull to kill the Borg that are trying to, like, fuck with their deflector dish is great. And there's some cool scenes, but for the most part, it's kind of like, I hate this, the way they're changing the Borg for the movie. I hate it. Great score, though, by Jerry Goldsmith. I think the main theme for First Contact is another one of the greatest pieces of music ever made. So that was a huge hit, an even bigger hit, because it had horror elements to it. So it attracted, like, the teenagers that normally wouldn't be interested in Star Trek, because it was kind of like, we're kind of seeing a sci-fi horror movie. So it made a lot of money. So naturally, they get another one. That's Insurrection. And that had the highest budget of any Star Trek movie ever made. And it was the first one to use specifically only CGI for the effects. There was no model work done. And the way I describe it to people is it has a good story, because it's kind of like about the way that, the Native Americans of the U.S., were kind of displaced by everybody that decided to come over here from other countries. They just kind of pushed them all aside. That's kind of what's going on here. That aspect of it is interesting. I think the Picard romance thing is dumb as fuck. I think the villains are cool, though. The Sonar are cool, and their deal with why they look the way they do is kind of effed up. I wish they expanded on that a little bit somehow, but they didn't. Their beef with the Baku on the planet where the movie takes place is interesting. And but the thing is, just like Star Trek 4, a lot of unnecessary comedy that's not funny, like Data making a joke about his boobs and stuff like that, or Data, like, in the water going, like, in case of a crash landing, I have been designed to be a flotation device, and here he starts bobbing around in the water. I'm like, really? Come on. It's not funny. That's embarrassing. But it has a lot of cool action scenes. The movie is basically a Western, and I think that's really fun. It turns into like the Magnificent Seven at one point, where the camera pans across all the main characters' faces before they get into a firefight. And I was like, that's like right out of the Magnificent Seven. That's rad. And Jonathan Frakes, who plays Riker, directed this one and First Contact, and where he made great choices with the actors in First Contact, I think he kind of made the opposite choices here. And he kind of like decided to focus on like giving everybody their little comedy moment and stuff like that. But my big thing is where he made choices in First Contact where I was like, we can put a little bit more effort in and it'll have a better end result, like with the way certain scenes played out. And here, the same thing happened, but he was just kind of like, well, my last film was a hit. We'll just do it the easy way here. It shows, because a lot of it comes off as really lazy. But it's fun, has another decent score and all that. But that didn't make a ton of money. It made its money back and made a little bit of profit, but it wasn't the huge hit that First Contact was. So when it came to the last movie that they made, Nemesis, the budget was slashed by about half, and they brought in a director who had no idea of anything Star Trek related. It was Stuart Baird, who still is an editor in Hollywood. Directed a couple movies like U.S. Marshals, which was like the spinoff of The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, and Executive Decision, which was a really fun movie with Kurt Russell. It's the one where Steven Seagal gets like killed within 5 minutes of showing up in the movie. So I was kind of excited to see what his take on it is. And Nemesis, ended up being like my favorite of the four. It's also an unpopular opinion because it's also considered one of the worst movies by most people. But I have a thing about stories where characters get to see the flip side of themselves, where they get to see like the what if version, and Picard gets to see like his doppelganger, his like opposite. And I think it's really interesting to see how his character, because I love his character. His character, I think, is one of my favorite characters in science fiction, and to see him deal with like the dark side of him I love it. I absolutely love it. It has tons of action in it. Another great score by Jerry Goldsmith. The effects are fantastic. Yeah, there's a little too much action in it, if you ask, and the movie was edited to death. There is so much cool stuff that was left on the editing room floor, the cutting room floor, that it kind of baffles me, because this movie has a ton of deleted scenes in the extras, and I wish every single one of them was put back in the movie, except the stuff with Wesley Crusher. He has no business being in here. But like the mind rape scenes with Troy, there was actually two of them. The first one we see in the movie is when she's in bed with Riker, and then when she's on her way to go and see Beverly in sickbay about it, it happens again in the elevator, and it was shot with this really cool periscope lens, where it was just like this lens that was coming down from the ceiling of the turbo lift, and like it just keeps turning, and like it turns in one direction, and you can only see that Troy's in the elevator, and then when it goes around again, Shinzon is standing there, and he does it again. He does the whole mind invasion thing, and it's really, really cool. And that's why she's in her Starfleet uniform when you see her in sickbay in the movie, is because she was on her way there, and it happened while she was wearing a uniform. There's a scene where they set up why that Data was going to die, and they cut it out, and just kind of comes out of nowhere in the movie now. Now, I mean, I get it. I understand why he wanted out of the series too. He's like, I'm aging too much to play this character anymore. So it kind of like made sense when it happened. But like the scene that there was actually a scene setting it up, and they cut it out. I'm like, why did you do that? And everyone says it was to tighten up the narrative and make it flow more. I'm like, yeah, but we love these characters. Anytime we can spend with them is good. So there's like 30 minutes of deleted scenes. The only stuff I would have left out was the stuff with the new first officer from the end of the movie, which is stupid. But like I said, great character stuff. I love the action scenes. Data does die, but there's like hope, like with the search for Spock, with B4, like his twin. And I really, really like that one quite a bit, to the point where I wrote a sequel to Nemesis, a complete script for a sequel to Nemesis that I ended up calling Restoration. And I like that script. That's probably one of the only scripts I've written that I actually really like, to the point where I'm thinking about writing another one, because the idea behind Nemesis was, the tagline was a generation's final journey begins. They were supposed to do another trilogy within the series, like the way they did with Star Trek 2, 3, and 4. And there was supposed to be this interconnecting 3-movie arc. And Nemesis was supposed to be the first one. And if it was successful, they would have kept going. But it was not a success. It bombed because they decided to release it the week before Return of the King came out. Was it Return of the King or Two Towers? No, it was Two Towers. The week before Two Towers came out. Bad move, guys. So there was supposed to be a generation's final journey continues, and then a generation's final journey ends. And that's what I was doing with my scripts. So there was that. So I've talked way too much about Star Trek. Moving on. I haven't opened this yet, but the Superman 5-film collection from 1978 to 1987. And these are all the Christopher Reeve films. Well, there was only 4 Christopher Reeve films. Why is it a 5-film collection? Well, there's 2 versions of Superman 2 in here. So you got the original Superman motion picture, or Superman the movie, which came out in 78. Fantastic. Has 2 versions of that too. There's the theatrical cut and then the extended cut, which was the television cut. Great movie. I love it. I did not like it as a kid. As a little kid, I thought it was so boring. And all the stuff with Lois Lane, all that mushy stuff. I was like, no. Why did he have to do all that stuff just to save Lois? Like, she's dead. Leave her alone. And my mom's like, well, she's the main love interest for that character. He had to save her. I don't care. He should have just left her for dead. I don't care. That kind of thing when you're a kid. It's grown on me as an adult. I really like it. But Superman 2 was my jam as a kid, because that's the one that's all action, because everything that was set up in 2 was 2 was set up in the beginning of the first film. And it's all action. It's all about the Kryptonian criminals, Zod and his crew, trying to conquer the Earth. And Superman's like, ain't having it. But part 1 and 2 were filmed back to back originally. They were supposed to be released like a year apart. But the money started to, like the budget started to go up while they were doing it. So the Salkinds who produced the first two movies and the third one, Richard Donner was directing these movies. Richard Donner, who directed The Omen. The Omen got him the job directing these. They pulled him aside and they're like, "Look, we're going to stop production on part two," because they were finished filming part one. They were like 3/4 of the way through with part two. Like, look, we're going to put a hold on part two. We're going to go and try to put together part one. We're going to edit it together, release it, and we'll finish part two later. Because we have all these actors on retainer. We can just get them to come back whenever we can finish filming all this stuff. And he's like, okay. They edit the first movie together, release it. It's a massive hit. The Salkinds were also known for being real cheapskatey and kind of shady when it comes to certain things. So they were like, look, we just made all the money back from part one and what we put into making part one and two. We don't need Donner anymore. We don't have to pay. We don't have to pay him his fee for part two now. We'll bring in this dude that there was this dude that was named Richard Lester, who directed two movies for the Salkinds before. It was like the Three Musketeers and the Four Musketeers. He's way cheaper than Donner is. We can bring him in, refilm some scenes, and we'll make the second movie even cheaper than it was going to be originally, and then even more profit for us. And that's what happened. But Gene Hackman wasn't having it. Gene Hackman refused to come back and film anything because of the way they treated Richard Donner. And that's why he was not in the third movie. And there is a definite Lex Luthor replacement as the villain in part three because he didn't want to have anything to do with the Salkinds from that point on. Everybody else came back, though, but what's her name? Margot Kidder was not happy about it either, but she was contractually obligated to do it. Gene Hackman broke his contract to get out of it. And they ended up having to reshoot a bunch of stuff in order to get Lester the credit. So he had to have directed 51% of the movie. So they went back and reshot a bunch of stuff cheaply. And thing is, the movie worked out. It's half Richard Donner stuff, and it's half Richard Donner, half Richard Lester stuff. And I think it's super fun. But when Superman Returns was coming out in the 2000s, they wanted to get Richard Donner to put together his cut of part two. So they used some CGI trickery and used all the deleted scenes that they had found over the years and put it back together. And that's the Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, which is the third movie in here. And it is awful, if you ask me. It is one of the worst things I've ever seen. It turns Zod from a scary villain into a laughingstock. The stuff he does now is so over the top. It's like the whole idea with Richard Donner directing the first two movies was they were supposed to be cheesy, like cheese free. I guess everyone was assuming that superhero stuff had to be cheesy to work, like with the old Batman show with Adam West and Burt Ward. So like they were trying to avoid cheese. Well, part two was like Richard Donner's version is full of cheese to the point where it's like, this sucks. Like it really sucks if you ask me. Absolutely hate it. There's a couple of good moments they put back into it, like so they wouldn't have to pay Marlon Brando millions of dollars to appear in part two for like a minute and a half. They reshot the scenes that Marlon Brando did with the actress who played his wife in the first movie instead, who did not cost millions of dollars. So they've shafted Marlon Brando out of some money too. They put those scenes back in, and those scenes are cool. There's a couple of moments, but now they make it look like Superman at the end of the first movie, Lois dies in that earthquake. He goes and he like turns the earth backwards to reverse time so he can save her. Well, in the second movie, he does it again now in the Richard Donner version. And it's like, now it looks like Superman got his ass beat because Superman gives up his powers in this one. And he does it for Lois. And then Zod comes and starts wrecking shit. So he's like, great, I made a mistake. I got to go and get my powers back. And he ends up getting his ass kicked by some dude in a diner. Like in a basic fist fight, he can't even protect himself without his powers. And he gets his ass beat. So now because he returns time back at the end of this one also, he looks like he does it just so he can go back and beat that dude's ass that beat his ass. And it is like, no, that's not what Superman's about. It is so bad. I cannot stand it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Then we have part three because part two was a huge hit. Got to make another one. So they made part three. And because of Gene Hackman not being involved anymore, because of what the Salkinds did, they brought in Robert Vaughn to play a new villain. who is interested in supercomputers and controlling the oil and the coffee of the world and all this kind of crap. And Richard Pryor is like a hacker who does all these things for him and creates a different version of kryptonite that turns Superman bad. And the best scene in the entire movie is Superman splitting into two at one point, and like his good half fights his bad half. And that's probably the best scene in the entire film. Everything else is just cheesy and hokey, and I cannot stand it. It's a joke. Even as a kid, I was like, this sucks. And then you got Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, because of Superman 3 bombing at the theaters. Warner Brothers and the Salkinds sold off the rights to Canon Films. Canon, the people that have been doing nothing but like schlock for decades, are like, at this time in 87, they're buying and they're trying to make themselves a A-list production company. But everything that they do to do that is bombing. So they hired Tobe Hooper, who directed Poltergeist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to make 3 movies for them. All 3 of them bombed. They threw a lot of money at him. All 3 bombed. They did Masters of the Universe with a huge budget for them. That bombed. And then Superman 4, another movie for them with not a big budget for a Superman movie, but a big budget for Canon, bombed hard, and it basically destroyed Canon. So one of the reasons I wanted to get this is because I'm trying to get as many Canon films in my collection as possible, and I needed Part 4 to do that. But Part 4 is a laughably bad superhero movie. It is like beyond hokey. Because the Salkinds were no longer involved, Gene Hackman came back to play Lex Luthor again, and it's so bad. It's so cheap. They keep reusing shots of Superman flying over and over again. It is so dumb. I really don't like it. I do not like it. But now we move on to awesomeness, and that is Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So I didn't bring it up, but look, I've been doing this for an hour, a little over an hour, and I've only talked about these many movies. This is what I'm talking about, guys. I can talk about movies for hours. The Spider-Man Far From Home that I got from Korea because it was never released in 3D over here. This version of Terminator 2 Judgment Day I have is also from Korea because this is the 4K and 3D Blu-ray version because this got a re-release theatrically. Or it got a re-release theatrically. I just said it right. In like 2018, 2019, something like that. 2017 maybe? I don't remember. In 3D. And I went and saw it, and it blew my freaking mind. I was like, this movie there was no designs for this to ever be in 3D. So they could not have done anything while they were filming it that would sell as a 3D effect. But James Cameron, I don't know, it works as a 3D film. It really does. So the only way I can get this was from Korea. Thing is, this movie is also notorious for being one of the worst 4K transfers of all time. Because everything that I complained about when I talked about The Abyss, I'll probably talk about it in next week's stream too. The Abyss, Aliens, and True Lies 4K releases, James Cameron hates film grain. You film on film, you're going to have film grain. He seems to hate it. So he has it digitally scrubbed from every movie that he has had restored to 4K. There's a version of the original Terminator about to come out on 4K too. I'm afraid. I am afraid. Because when you watch this in 4K, everybody looks like they're made out of plastic. Because when you scrub all of that away, it kind of removes most of the image and like the contrast and all that kind of stuff. So AI has to be used in order to fill in the blanks. And it makes everybody look like a mannequin. So when I watched this in 3D, I really didn't notice it because the 3D effect is kind of covering it up. And when you watch it in 2D, it's really noticeable and it is like really bad. And everybody says, like when you see lists of the worst 4K transfers of all time, Terminator 2 is always on that list. And I'm pretty sure True Lies is going to be on that list too. But the movie is fantastic. I don't care. It could have the worst transfer ever. I will watch it 500 times. I really don't give a shit. And in 3D, I watched this in 3D, and it is awesome. Sequel to the original Terminator picks up like a decade after that movie. Does it? Yeah, like over a decade, I think. And one of the best action movies of all time. And I remember seeing this the weekend that it was released. My grandmother was visiting. And when I said, hey, Grandma, you want to go see the new Arnold movie? Yes, I do. And she went and saw it, and then this time I knew better because every time I saw an Arnold movie with her, like I said earlier, all she would do was go, oh my, the whole movie, every time he's on screen, oh my. I saw 3 Arnold movies with her like that. What was it? Kindergarten Cop, Running Man, and Red Heat. And I was like, not happening again. So we went to a theater that had a balcony, and I was like, no, Grandma, you go and sit on the floor level. Me and Dan, my brother, are going to go and sit in the upper level. That's exactly what we did. I didn't have to hear the other people that she was sitting around had to deal with the whole, oh my thing, the whole movie. But one of the best movies, one of the best sequels ever made. It is absolutely fantastic. I think it's like James Cameron's big masterpiece. And then we have the Three Flavors Cornetto trilogy, which is Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and The World's End. All the movies that feature Simon Pegg and Nick Frost that were done by Edgar Wright. I should probably open this because I've been wanting to watch. Like, Shaun of the Dead got re-released theatrically about a week or two ago, and I wanted to go and see it, but I was just kind of like, I have it at home. Like, I don't really need to spend money on it. But I like 2 of these movies, which justified the price. And then these were also being released separately, but I was like, why would I buy 3 separate releases that are going to take up 3 times the space when this is just a slightly thicker Blu-ray 4K case. Shaun of the Dead is a really awesome zombie movie. A lot of clever jokes and stuff that goes on with like zombie lore. I really like it. The characters are really likable. Hot Fuzz is like a parody of cop movies with the same 2 actors. That one is awesome too. I remember I went and saw it with my buddy Charlie, and we died in that theater. We were laughing so damn hard. So when the 3rd movie came out, The World's End, it was released on my birthday the year that it came out. And that was the movie me and a bunch of friends went to see, and I was so bummed when it was over because I absolutely hated it. So you got zombies in the first movie. You've got like a cops and robbers movie for the third one, for the second one. And then in the third one, it deals with aliens. And it is just so out of left field when it happens, when like the tone of the movie changes, where it's like a bunch of friends getting together for like a pub crawl, for like their 40th anniversary of being for like one guy's 40th birthday or whatever. They're going on like a pub crawl. And then all of a sudden aliens show up. And it's so freaking stupid if you ask me. I cannot stand The World's End at all. I think it's not funny. The script sucks. I do not like it. I don't even like the characters in it all that much. But I bought it for the first 2 films, so that was justification enough. And then we have this, the Toxic Avenger Collection, TA in 4K. That's awesome. Another one where I only like 2 movies in this collection. So you have a really cheap case. This is an expensive set, and that is the cheapest case I've ever had for one of these sets. So, Troma, you gypped me. So you have the original Toxic Avenger, which is like their Troma's low-budget version of a superhero movie, where a janitor who is socially awkward gets thrown by a bunch of jocks at the gym he works at out a window, and he lands in a tub of toxic waste and mutates into the Toxic Avenger, which is this big muscular creature with a mop that goes around taking out bad guys now. And it's really funny, and it's clever, and it's like a satire of superhero stuff. But it does have your typical Troma stuff. Like there's a lot of sex, there's a lot of nudity, there's a lot of like gore, real nasty gore. Like for some reason, Lloyd Kaufman has a thing about people pooping themselves a lot and heads getting crushed. It's like in every movie he does, somebody gets their head crushed, and then other characters like will poop their pants. In part 4, someone gets their head run over by a car and crushed, and then they poop their pants. But the first one's really funny. Then there's the second one, and the third one, which were shot back to back. And even Lloyd Kaufman has said those were a mistake. Although it is kind of funny that Michael Jai White's first movie was Toxic Avenger Part 3. These were just like crapped out to make some money. And he admits it, which is funny. I have only seen each of them once. And I'll probably never watch them again. It came with a card also that shows Lloyd Kaufman and Michael... What's his name? Michael Herzer or something like that. The people that created Troma. When they first created Troma, and then there's them as old men still making movies. And then we have my favorite, which is Citizen Toxic Avenger 4. This one is my absolute favorite. It It's an alternate universe story where Toxic Avenger is trying to stop this school invasion, and a bomb goes off, and it shoots him off into an alternate dimension where there is an evil Toxic Avenger called the Noxious Offender, and he switches places with his doppelganger. So now his evil version is in the good universe, and the good one is in the evil universe. And it's really clever, has a lot of cameos by a lot of actors like Lemmy, and Ron Jeremy's in it, and Corey Feldman, I think, is in it too. There's people wearing KMFDM shirts in it, which makes me laugh. It's a lot of vulgar stuff going on. There's a lot of nasty shit. I'm not going to repeat a lot of stuff in it, but one of my favorite characters of all time is in this movie. His name is Tito, and when I showed this to Church, the Game Grinder, and Cardboard Zero when they came to visit in February, we were quoting him all weekend. He has some of the best lines in the entire movie. Absolutely love that one. Mainly the reason why I bought this set was so I could have a version of that on high def, because it never came out on Blu-ray. So I was super excited to get a copy of that. Next up we have, I just recently got this. I don't know if I've talked about it. Is this on my list? Is this a spoiler? It is. You're about to get a spoiler for my pickups at the end of the month. So there was a sale on the Groove website, the Universal's sell-through website, and they were like, oh, we're discounting a bunch. Like, I got a notification on Facebook of all things. It was like an ad. Like, we're doing a blowout, like a clearance sale for a bunch of titles on 4K and Blu-ray and all that. See what we got. So I'm like, okay, fine, I'll go see. So I ended up buying two things. What was the other one? Oh, I bought four things, which you'll see in the pickup video at the end of the month. One of which is this Train to Busan 2-movie collection. So it has Train to Busan and Train to Busan Presents Peninsula. Honestly, Peninsula is like its own thing, and it was just thrown into the Train to Busan universe in order to get name recognition to sell tickets. But Train to Busan is a Korean zombie movie, and I think it's fantastic. Real creative take, an emotional take on this kind of thing because of the whole father-daughter thing that's going on in it. So it is a father and daughter on their way to Busan, which is a town in Korea, and the zombie outbreak happens while they're on the train, and it happens in the train, and it's about trying to live to get to the destination kind of thing, and it is fantastic. I absolutely love it. And then they're like, during COVID, this Peninsula thing got released. It just kind of got thrown out in order to have something playing in theaters during COVID. And I ended up renting it on video on demand, and I watched it. I was like, wow, that really sucked. It's basically where Train to Busan is like, it has action stuff in it, but it's not about action. It's about the characters and dealing with the whole zombie thing. Peninsula is like a zombie version of Fast and the Furious. There is so much CGI car chases where like a car that would probably hit one person and break apart is running over like hordes of zombies in the streets and like drifting into them and all this kind of stuff. It is so dumb. But I wanted to have both movies in the series. Like I said, I do believe Peninsula was just originally called Peninsula and had to do with a zombie outbreak in Korea. But because of Train to Busan being such a huge hit, they were like, we'll just add it into this one, the series. So now it's kind of a series. I guess we're getting a remake of Train to Busan in the U.S., and I'm not going to go and see it because that's going to be terrible. But had to get this. I think I paid like $10 for it. And then my favorite film of all time got released by Criterion Collection in this bizarre-ass packaging that does not fit on any normal shelf I have. So I have it off to the side with the rest of the box set stuff because I have all the packaging of weird sizes on that shelf as well. And that is Train Spotting. This movie has everything you could ever want in a movie in it. It is a comedy. It is a drama. It is about drugs. It's almost like a thriller. It's like a revenge thing at one point. Every genre of film is like represented in here at some point. And it is fantastic. It's the first time I saw Ewan McGregor in any real capacity, and I was like, he is like my favorite actor of all time now. You know, I could watch anything that guy's in. It also has Robert Carlyle, who has gone on to be a huge star. It also has Ewan Bremner, who you've probably seen in 5 million movies, but he always plays somebody that's completely different. So here he plays like this mousy little, heroin addict. He was in The Rundown. He was the Scottish pilot in that. He was in Black Hawk Down. He was the one who was teamed up with Tom Hardy and went deaf because Tom Hardy keeps shooting the guns by his head, and he keeps on saying, "Will you stop it? You're going to affect my hearing." And eventually he's just going, "What?" You've seen him in 500 movies. And also Johnny Lee Miller, who the reason I saw this movie was because Johnny Lee Miller, because he was in Hackers a couple of years before, or the year before. And I was like, hey, that's a dude from Hackers. I love Hackers. I should go see that movie, see what it's all about. And yeah, it's about a bunch of heroin addicts, and like it's like a slice of life kind of thing. And like the main character, Renton, played by Ewan McGregor, tries to get clean for a girl and it doesn't kind of work out. His friends pressure him back into it kind of stuff. And then gets swept up in this. It turns into a crime movie too at one point. There's like this, we found a whole bunch of heroin. We're going to go try and sell it, make some money. And it's like a little bit of everything, like I said. So it has this weird digipack packaging, which I'm not a big fan of. But it opens up. And opens up. And I do not like when they have the discs in the cardboard sleeves like that. It's just prone to get damaged. And it also has a book that it comes with that has just some information, some pictures of the actors and whatnot. But absolutely love this movie. I could watch it any day. And I saw this in the theater like 3 times, I want to say. And ended up trying to get tickets. I did win tickets to see the sequel, a sneak preview of the sequel that was called T2, which I think is T2 Trainspotting. But I didn't go because it was at a theater. The screening was being held at a theater where they charge you an insane amount of money for parking. And I won 2 tickets, and if I did not show up with a number one, like a +1, they would revoke my ability to sign up for these kind of things again. So they would rather you just not show up than show up and are missing a person, which is kind of stupid when you think about it. But I ended up liking the second one as well, but absolutely had to have Trainspotting. Like I said, my favorite film of all time. But then we have Trebbers, which I got from Arrow Video. Absolutely love the first one especially. Saw this in the theater. I would say like the first big monster movie that I saw in the theater because it was PG-13, so we were allowed. And got this from, like I said, Arrow, who releases like these limited editions with these super hard cases, which I love. And they always come with a bunch of extras, so you get the movie. What is this? It has a coupon for Walter Chang's Market, the market that's in the middle of Perfection, the town from the movie, which is awesome. Also has a bunch of lobby cards in here. Get the artwork that they have on the box. The original theatrical poster with some pictures of the actors. So Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward are the main characters. And it's a monster movie that takes place in like a small Arizona town that's all like trailers. These creatures that they end up calling graboids come like they live in the ground, and they hunt along the ground, and they come up from the ground to eat you. And it's a lot of fun. I remember one of my mom's friends, I've talked about this before, especially when it came to hardware. One of my mom's friends from bowling just had gotten divorced. Her son wasn't taking it very well, so she was trying to have her son hang out with people that she knew he would get along with to like cheer him up. So my mom kind of tried to force him on me and my brother. And one day this kid, Sean's mom, showed up at our house and was like, hey, we're going to take the 2 of you to see a movie. The 3 of or the 4 of us, me, her kid, Sean, and then me and my brother. And the movie we ended up seeing was Tremors. And we ended up loving it. Every one of us loved it. And it's become like a favorite of mine ever since. And I was glad that it kind of caught on too. City of Perfection poster. On the other side, it has like the anatomy of a graboid, which is kind of rad. And it kind of has hints as to stuff that happens in the sequels, if you read what that says about that little thing inside of it. And it also has a big poster. On one side, it has the new artwork that was made for this release, which I still think is pretty rad, as well as the original theatrical poster. And a giant freaking book that has like an essay about the making of the movie. And it is super fun. I've watched this pretty much every year because I like it that much. It is just a ton of fun. It's just a breezy, fun movie filled with really likable characters, really cool monsters. It's not gory at all, but it is a little scary and creepy at times before the characters find out what's really going on. But super fun. And because it was a decent hit in the theaters, but it was a massive hit on home video, all of a sudden we got direct-to-video sequels. And I was working at the video store that I keep talking about when these started to come out. And when the screener copy for the first one showed up, my boss handed it to me, and you will not believe how freaking excited I was to watch it. Which leads us to Tremors 2 Aftershocks, which is something I am super surprised got a 4K release. Like a direct-to-video sequel, which apparently was a big hit because there ended up being, how many are there now? 7 Tremors movies and a television show that was on Sci-Fi Channel for like one season. It's freaking crazy. So once again, inside the packaging, you get another poster with like an anatomy of the new version of the creature. So the thing about each of these movies is they show that the graboids evolve, and there's like a life cycle. So you start with the graboid, which is the big snake thing, and then when they evolve, they turn into shriekers. Is that what they called them? Yeah, shriekers, which are these little things. And these have legs. They run around and they hunt by. They don't have eyes, just like the graboids. Those hunt by sound. On the ground, they hear the thumps of people on the ground, and that's how they hunt. These hunt by heat. They have a sensor on the top of their head that detects heat, and that's how they zone in on their prey. And then they evolve again to these things they call ass blasters that fly in the third movie, and then they come back around to being graboids again. It's a fun movie. I like this one. Not nearly as good as the first, obviously, because Kevin Bacon never came back, but Fred Ward did. And so did Michael Gross, the dad from Family Ties, who played the gun enthusiast, and his wife is Reba McEntire in the first one. Michael Gross from Family Ties is the only actor who was in every iteration of these movies. He's been in every single direct-to-video film and the television show. He's the only link throughout everything to the first one. But Fred Ward did come back for this sequel. There's a ton of extras. As you can see, this entire section down here also came with another thick book that has like essays on the making of the movie. And for a direct-to-video movie to get this kind of treatment, it still boggles my mind. And we also get a poster again with the newly commissioned artwork for this release. And the original theatrical poster, even though this did not get a theatrical release, but this is the poster that I hung up in the window of the video store I worked at to try to bring people in, and it did. This movie rented like crazy. You would not believe. I did not realize that Tremors had that big of a following until I worked at that video store and this came out. And then when the third movie came out, I was just like, okay, I get it now. Like, I did not realize that it was a huge thing. I thought it was just a me thing and my friend's thing, but nope, apparently Tremors is the shit. So I'm hoping that Tremors 2's 4K release sold enough that we would get at least the third one on 4K. I can do without the fourth one. The fourth one is like a prequel that goes back to like the 1920s or whatever when Perfection was founded. And it turns out that Michael Gross plays like an ancestor of his character in the other movies when he moves into to the Perfection in the beginning of the story and ends up becoming a gun enthusiast and passes it down the line to his ancestors or to his descendants. And another awesome release by Arrow is True Romance. This is the limited edition version that they have. They always release their movies in limited editions. Once these sell out, they just have a standard edition that you can buy, which is just, the movie. But I try to get these limited editions, especially when it comes to movies that I really like, because I like all the extra stuff. So once again, comes in a really thick, hard cardboard case with some pretty decent artwork on it with Christian Slater and Patricia Arquette on the cover. You get the movie. on 4K. Also comes with a bunch of lobby cards, like the rest of them do, showing some scenes from the movie. And also a poster with the original and the newly commissioned artwork. I would not hang this one up. I'm not too keen on how they made Christian Slater look. They made it look like he has no upper lip. But this is the original one-sheet design, which is pretty awesome. Has a great cast. Look at that cast. Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer. Val Kilmer plays Elvis. Gary Oldman plays a pimp. Brad Pitt has probably some of the best lines ever. And Christopher Walken, the scene between Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper is classic. But, like, the stuff with Brad Pitt is barely in the movie. He's like the roommate of a character that they Patricia Arquette and Christian Slater meet up with later on. And he's like always high. So, like, a hitman comes looking for the two main characters at this house, and Brad Pitt's the only one home. And they're like, hey, have you seen these two people? And he's just like, no, man. He's like, okay, I'll be back. He goes, don't you condescend me, man. I'll fucking kill you. Also comes with another book that has a bunch of essays about the making of the movie. So this was written by Quentin Tarantino, and I think it was like the first script he ever wrote, but he ended up selling it a lot later, like after Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction became a hit. I think it was after mostly Reservoir Dogs sold and became a hit that people started looking at the old scripts that he had written, and Tony Scott got his hands on it and directed this. And I remember I went and saw it opening night with my brother and one of his friends, and we were just like, God damn, like, for a gangster movie that's also kind of like a love story, this is one of the most violent and brutal things I've ever seen. There's this scene where Patricia Arquette gets her ass kicked by James Gandolfini from The Sopranos for a good 10 minutes straight. He beats her ass like you would not believe. And it is, like, hard to watch at times. But she gets the upper hand on him at one point. It is awesome. But it's a great crime movie. Christian Slater plays this, like, nerdy, lonely guy that works at a comic book shop, meets a hooker played by Patricia Arquette, and they, like, fall in love instantly, get married, and she ends up stealing a suitcase full of cocaine from her pimp, and they end up going to L.A., because I think they were in New Jersey in the beginning, and they end up going to L.A. to sell it, and the trouble follows them. And it's pretty awesome. I absolutely love it. Love it, love it, love it. Next up is The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. This is the Nicolas Cage movie that came out a couple of years ago with Pedro Pascal and Tiffany Haddish in it. I saw a sneak preview of this as well. A friend of mine got tickets to go and see a sneak preview, and we went and saw it, and I had so much fun watching this. Pedro Pascal is such a great comedic actor. Like, he can do serious stuff too, but when it comes to comedy, he is so funny. There are looks that he throws at Nicolas Cage. There's that meme of him just, like, staring at Nicolas Cage with that weird smile. It is so much shit in this movie. You could quote it. Like, I would meme the shit out of this movie. And this is another one of those Lionsgate releases that is a steelbook, and you remove the cover, and it reveals all the other versions of Nicolas Cage over the years on the back as well. So Nicolas Cage is modern day Nicolas Cage is the main character of the show, and Pedro Pascal plays this rich dude who basically pays Nicolas Cage to hang out with him for a weekend at his, like, resort home, like his mansion out in the middle of nowhere. And Tiffany Haddish plays a cop that's after, I can't remember exactly what. I think she wanted Nicolas Cage to go undercover to bust Pedro Pascal because it's suspected that Pedro Pascal is a drug runner. But the thing is, Nicolas Cage, or Nick Cage as they call this version of him in the movie, is constantly having conversations with the younger version of himself called Nicolas Cage, which is, like, modeled after how he looked in Vampire's Kiss. And it is so weird, but it is so much fun. This is, like, a clever, clever movie. And like I said, I could watch this any day, and it's so freaking funny. Came out of nowhere and kind of kicked my ass. Next is these two collections of classic Universal monster movies. I have seen each of these in the theater. So each time that there was a new release, new one of these released, they would play a double feature of two of the films, because each of these collections have 4 movies on them. And they would, at the beginning of October, they would play two of them as a double feature. And then at the end of October, when these were released, they would do the other two movies as a double feature. So the first set is Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, and The Wolf Man. So the first block that they showed theatrically to show off the new 4K restoration was Dracula and Frankenstein, and the second one was Invisible Man and The Wolf Man. So I had seen all of these at some point in my youth, and I barely remembered them. So I was like, this is great. I get to see them all cleaned up, in a theater no less, and get to watch them like the way I remember like all those people back in the 1930s got to watch these. And Dracula doesn't really hold up all that much, if you ask me. It's kind of boring. It's probably the better between that one and Frankenstein, because Frankenstein bored the piss out of me. It's not bad. It's just like it's from another era. But just didn't really do much for me. Dracula, I think, is the better of the two. But when it came to The Invisible Man and The Wolf Man, I had so much fun watching The Invisible Man, which I remembered the least out of any of them. And The Wolf Man kind of bored me too. Not to say it's bad or anything like that. It's just like, yeah, there's just nothing really going on in it. But The Invisible Man is like really fun, especially when it comes to like that manic woman that works at the hotel where the invisible dude is staying and how crazy she gets. She's always screaming hysterically, and it's really funny. It's probably the best made out of them all too, if you ask me. So I was really happy to get that. And then they did it again the following year, and they did the theatrical releases with these too. So I saw each of these in the theater also. And this one is The Mummy, The Bride of Frankenstein, Phantom of the Opera, and Creature from the Black Lagoon. So I remember seeing The Mummy back when I was a kid. Don't remember it. I remember seeing Bride of Frankenstein when I was a kid. Did not remember it. Never saw Phantom of the Opera. I thought this was also a black and white movie, and it was not. All these are black and white except for Phantom of the Opera. And then Creature from the Black Lagoon I've obviously seen many, many times. I already owned it because I have the 3D version of it on Blu-ray. So Mummy is nothing like the one with Brendan Fraser that is a remake of this. This one actually, if you ask me, does not hold up at all. It is super boring, and there was long stretches where absolutely nothing is going on. So not my favorite. Bride of Frankenstein, I know a lot of people think that is fantastic. I was not a fan. The whole thing with the little miniaturized people kind of came out of nowhere. It's cool looking that they were able to do effects like that back in the 30s. But the movie is just kind of pointless again. It's just nothing really going on in it. I don't know what the big deal is. Phantom of the Opera was okay. Not my favorite retelling of that story. Definitely like the one with Robert Englund from the 80s a lot better than this one. Also, things aren't developed all the way, so you don't really know what's going on a lot of the time, so it kind of was confusing to watch. Creature from the Black Lagoon, I think, is super fun. I've always enjoyed Creature from the Black Lagoon. I remember seeing that one as a kid and watched it when my 3D version showed up, and I was like, this is super freaking cool. Still a lot of fun. And I have all these sequels to Creature from the Black Lagoon on that Blu-ray set as well. Next up is Universal Soldier. So this is Roland Emmerich, the guy who did Independence Day and Stargate and Godzilla and 2012 and I'm trying to think what was the other one he did. Was it 10,000 BC or something like that? Whatever. This was the movie that put him on the map. He had done a movie prior to this called Moon 44 that nobody saw, bombed hard. But Dean Devlin was an actor in that movie, and that's how we met Roland Emmerich. And together, the two of them created like a little partnership and became a juggernaut in the 90s. And Universal Soldier was the movie that put Roland Emmerich on the map. This is a Van Damme versus Dolph Lundgren action movie, science fiction action movie, that I remember missing in the theater. I remember my mother really wanting to go and see it, but we could never find time to get away to see it. It kind of disappeared pretty quick, but it made a lot of money. Throat's starting to get dry. So Van Damme and Dolph Lundgren are Vietnam vets who kill each other in the war. Dolph Lundgren's character had gone completely crazy, lost his mind. Van Damme attempts to stop him from killing some innocent villagers, and they end up killing each other, but get resurrected in the 90s for this program that uses dead soldiers to make these mindless killing machines for the military. But Van Damme's memories start coming back, and he ends up fighting what is being programmed into him. And then also Dolph Lundgren does too, and starts to act like a crazy person that he was in Vietnam again. and the two of them go at each other again, and it is a lot of fun. It is super entertaining. Van Damme does like this whole fish out of water thing because he is starting to get his memories back. He doesn't know how things work. And there's just this one line of dialogue that is super simple that he has. He meets up with this reporter who's trying to tell the story of what these soldiers are. You know, they're basically undead soldiers. You know, their bodies have been violated, you know, and reused like this. She ends up like hooking up with Van Damme's character and is going on the run from the government who are chasing her and him down. They stop at a diner, and for the first time in a long time, he actually has some food, and like he can't get enough of it, so he just keeps ordering plate upon plate of food and is just constantly stuffing his face for like a half an hour. And then when it comes out that he can't pay for the food because he doesn't know what money is, he ends up having to beat the ass of everybody in the damn diner. And like the cook comes after him at one point, and he's like, "Dude, you're gonna have to pay for that." And he sees the guy coming at him to punch him. And Van Damme just says this one line that cracks me up every time I hear it. He just goes, "I just want to eat." And it cracks me up every time I hear it, like I said. But it's a real fun action movie. I like it a lot. And this was the first of these Lionsgate steelbooks that I picked up at Best Buy that do something when you remove the slipcover. So here, you got Van Damme, you got Dolph Lundgren, you got them in their Universal Soldier, you know, getup, their gear. But when you remove the artwork, it reveals them in their Vietnam gear, which I think is pretty awesome. And even on the back, it kind of does something similar. So you've got like a generic picture here on the back of the person who's in charge of the Universal Soldier program and like the big vehicle that they travel around in. And you remove this and it shows like a scene from Vietnam in the beginning after Dolph Lundgren's basically destroyed everything. Real fun movie. I like it a lot. Otherwise, I wouldn't have bought it. Next up is another release from Arrow Video. That is The Warriors. I refused. Oh, God, I'm getting the hiccups now. Drink the soda to wet my throat. And then drinking the soda is making me hiccup. Great. This is one of those movies that everybody remember talking about all the time, but I never actually watched until... So this came out in the late 70s. I want to say 78. And I didn't watch it until 2003, maybe. And it's just one of those movies that kept getting away from me. I would see it at the video store on VHS all the time, and I would just be like, yeah, whatever. I'd rather watch this. I'll see it eventually. It just never happened. And then one of my friends started quoting it and talking about it quite a bit, and I was like, dude, I've never actually seen that movie. And he goes, oh, we're going to fix that. And we rented it, and we watched it, and I was like, that was pretty rad. Where has this movie been all my life kind of thing that happens? So I ended up becoming a huge fan of it. Went out and bought the DVD of it. I watched it a lot. And then was it a DVD? Or was it a Blu-ray? I think it was a DVD. It got released of like a director's cut of the movie. So this movie was directed by Walter Hill, and it's kind of like this comic booky version of like gang life. New York and Jersey are like just nothing but gangs, and each one is themed after something. It's really kind of cheesy. Well, they get a message from this big gang called the Riffs. They want all the gangs to meet up at one point and talk about coming together as one, because if they count all the members of these gangs together as one, they outnumber the cops by like 100 to 1, and they can take over New York. Well, a bunch of the Warriors, like 6 or 7 of them, go to this meeting and get framed for murdering the guy who was planning this merger. And it's basically them trying to get home to Coney Island and, get home alive. All the gangs are after them for killing the dude that ran the Riffs. And turns out they didn't do it. It was another dude from another gang that just did it to do it and blamed the Warriors because he didn't like them. That's it. But it's a real fun, like, chase movie, and there's a lot of cool action scenes in it. The music is a lot of fun. The characters, some are likable, some aren't. There's some questionable stuff that gets said and done in this movie that would not fly nowadays. But back in the 70s, it was a different time. But like I said, after I became a fan of this director's cut shows up. And I was like, ooh, cool. I got to check that out. So I went out and bought the DVD on day one. And since I knew that it was based on a book, but it was made to feel like a comic book film. I was like, I'm curious to see where this is going to go. So it has this forward on it, or this introduction from Walter Hill, the director, and he's like, I always intended this movie to be like a comic book, but we didn't have the budget to do it. And I also wrote the story to be like the Battle of Thermopylae or whatever it is, where it's like a whole bunch of people just trying to get back home, fighting through all these hordes of bad guys and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Maybe it wasn't the Battle of Thermopylae, but it was some Greek story that he was talking about. And then you watch the movie, and he pulled a George Lucas on it. He basically re-edited the movie, put all of these stupid CGI transitions in between scenes to look like comic book pages, and it ruins the movie. It ruins the flow. It ruins the introductions of some of the characters. So when they start introducing all the gangs that are coming after the Warriors, one of them is called the Baseball Furies. They're all wearing baseball jerseys, but they have their faces painted like clowns, and they all carry around a baseball bat to beat someone's ass. They have one of the coolest character introductions in the original version of the movie, and he ruins it with this comic book panel transition thing. And it's terrible. I watched it the one time, and I got rid of that shit the next day. And I'm like, I'm going to keep my theatrical cut version, and that is the only version I'm ever going to watch. I will never watch that director's cut again. Well, turns out that director's cut was the only version that ever got released on Blu-ray, and I was not having it. So I'm like, you know what? No way in hell. I'm not giving you money for that crap. I will not buy it until the theatrical version comes back out. I ended up having to buy, I want to say like 2 years ago, maybe. It got released in Australia by Imprint on Blu-ray with the theatrical and director's cut on one disc. Ended up buying that, but then all of a sudden there's this 4K version coming out from Arrow that has both versions on it as well. So I'm like, you know what? I'd rather just have the 4K. So I ended up buying this big-ass limited edition of theirs, and it has like a slip on it. The only one that I have of theirs that has like a slip, because it still has that hard cardboard box on the outside. On one side, you've got the Warrior characters, and on the other side, you've got a bunch of the different gang members and the lead guy from the Baseball Furies right in front. It looks like he's a member of KISS wearing a baseball jersey. Absolutely love it. Fantastic, fun movie, and I'm so glad that I can watch the theatrical cut again. That's the original artwork that I would always see whenever I would go to the video store, and I was just kind of like, whatever, I'll just wait. It has a bunch of stickers in it, which I'm never going to use, for all the different gangs. You got the Furies, the Turnbull RCs, the Lizzies, the Punks, the Riffs, the Warriors, the Rogues, the Orphans, the Electric Eliminators, the Moon Runners. You never actually see the Moon Runners. They just bring it up at one point. Like, we got the Moon Runners. And you've also got some lobby cards. Baseball Fury. You got the Warriors. James Remar, right here from 48 Hours. He's the one who says the worst stuff in the movie that would not fly nowadays. But it's a real fun movie, like I said. I could watch this any day of the week. By modern day standards, I would say it's a little slow, but I don't care because it's so entertaining. And it also comes with a poster that has the new artwork on it, which is awesome because it has the Baseball Furies in full force on this. And you got the Warriors on the train and the original theatrical one sheet, which is awesome. These are the armies of the night. They are 100,000 strong. They outnumber the cops 5-1. They could run New York City, but tonight they're all out to get the Warriors. And it also comes with this super thick book about the making of the movie. Look at that. That is like one hefty-ass essay. So, super thrilled to have this. Like I said, I'm willing to shell out a little extra money if it is a movie that I really, really like. So, super happy that I managed to snag the... And this is the thing, is normally I have to order from Arrow's website because the limited editions usually are only released there because of the limited quantities. But I ended up pre-ordering this from Amazon. It's weird. Kind of like with that whole Essentials collection thing with Big Lebowski. And because I got it from Amazon, some of the corners are all banged up because they cannot ship something in a box to save their lives. Here's another Arrow release, and it's not the greatest movie, but we got Waterworld. And this has how many versions of the movie on it? So you've got this is the 3-disc limited edition. Disc 1 has the theatrical cut in 4K and on Blu-ray. Disc 2 has the TV cut, which I do remember was broadcast on Stars, and my brother saw it, and he was like, it's terrible. It is so boring now, which is on Blu-ray. And Disc 3 has the Ulysses cut, which sadly is only on a Blu-ray, but if that's the only way I can watch it, so be it. Which is a version between the theatrical cut and the TV cut. And it is definitely the preferred way to watch it. It makes all the characters come to life. I mean, the theatrical cut is like over 2 hours, I want to say. But like the Mariner never comes off as a whole character. He just kind of comes off as like this asshole. You never really get any development on him. You never really get any development on any of the characters. They're just kind of there and are getting trudged along on this adventure, right? Well, this Ulysses cut actually expands on everything. You get to know the Mariner a little bit more. You get to know Gene Triplehorn's character a little bit more. The little girl comes off as a little less annoying in it. You even get some on Deacon, the bad guy, played by Dennis Hopper. And even the world is fleshed out a little bit more. And there's a moment that happens at the very end, which is really good. What's up, Waves and Games? Stars, isn't that for late night adult videos? No, that's Cinemax. Skinemax, yeah. I used to watch that shit all the time when my parents weren't home. Like, oh, I'm getting away with something. Boobs. Anyway, but the Ulysses cut is pretty awesome, which is the reason I wanted to have this. But the original film version is the only one that's in 4K, which kind of sucks. But I saw this in the theater opening weekend. I was really excited for it because the amount of times we had to watch Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves in my house was criminal. And I just wanted to get something. I wanted to watch something with Kevin Costner in it that did not have him shooting a bow with an arrow that was on fire in slow motion toward the camera another time. I was like, I need to watch something else to get that movie out of my fucking head because I hate that movie. So when Waterworld opened up, I'm like, hey, same guy made it. Let's go see that. Maybe it'll be better than Robin Hood, and maybe you can, this will be stuck in our head for the next 10 years. Mom will make us watch this 500 fucking times. Nope. We saw it in the theater, and we were like, my brother and I were like, it's okay. But the end of the movie got screwed up by the projectionist. So the big action scene at the end where Kevin Costner ties that bungee cord around his ankle and dives down on his boat to grab the little girl before Deacon gets her and drags her back up before the explosion happens. So he dives off the building or dives off the boat with the thing on his leg. And just as you see him coming down toward the boat to grab the little girl, all of a sudden the screen... So if the screen is like this, right, all of a sudden it goes like this. So the bottom of the screen, the bottom of the shot is in the middle of the screen, and the top of the shot is now here. So you're seeing the bottom half of the shot at the top of the screen and the top half of the shot at the bottom. And it's like, what's happening? Like all of a sudden there's an explosion that happens. You're like, I can't even make out what I'm seeing because like it's split. I'm like, what? And they left it like that for 5 minutes, and then finally somebody got up to complain. Thinking that I don't know if the projectionist bumped the camera or whatever, but like he didn't realize that he had done it, and it ruined the rest of the movie. So like we're like, okay, well, I technically have not seen the end of this movie. This is some bullshit. So honestly, me and my brother never bothered to go back and watch it again because we're just kind of like the movie was all right, but that Ulysses cut is where it's at. So not my favorite Kevin Costner movie. I'm not really a Kevin Costner fan. I like a couple of his movies, but whatever. Here's like the new artwork that was commissioned for this release and the original theatrical artwork. So this movie's also notorious for being a huge, like one of the most expensive movies ever made and one of the biggest bombs in Hollywood. So like because the movie was shot on open water, that's expensive. Their sets got destroyed by like a hurricane, like that big atoll set, that big city on the sea, that whole thing. It ended up drifting out to sea at one point. They had to go chasing after it, but it ended up getting destroyed by the hurricane. And then like Kevin Costner started acting like a dick on set. and he ended up fighting with the director the whole time. And the director quit, and Kevin Costner directed the rest of the movie. And the budget went to, what was it, 180 million or something, which was unheard of at the time. And then it barely made its money back. And it kind of killed Kevin Reynolds' career, that it got out that he ended up quitting. But it comes with another really super thick book with essays on it. And one of the cool things is, and this is for the video game fans, it actually has a section here about merchandising, including the video games. There is an ad for the Virtual Boy game right there, and then the one that was going to be coming out for the Super Nintendo, and then eventually the Genesis, which ended up getting canceled. The Virtual Boy one was the only one we got, but there are ROMs out there of the Genesis and the Super Nintendo one, and I think I want to get one. But yeah, that's the Waterworld. We're almost done, guys. We're almost there. 2 hours. I knew it. I freaking knew it. Next up, we have one of the more surprising movies that I've seen in recent years. So I remember this came out theatrically, and a bunch of people that I knew, there was in two camps. There was a bunch of people that I knew who were like, that was one of the coolest goddamn movies I've ever seen in my life. Like, it is so rad. And then there's the other ones like, that was pure shit. What the hell did I just watch, kind of thing. Because of it, I was like, I'm not going to go see it in the theater. I'll wait till it came out on home video. Didn't even do that. So every year around December, at the end of December, I always take the last 2 weeks of the year off just to decompress from a whole year of work, just play video games, watch movies, relax, hang out with friends, all that kind of stuff, and just not have to worry about work for 2 weeks. First day of my vacation, I'm laying in bed, and I was so excited about the vacation, I could not sleep. So I had laid down in bed. I was up all night the first night. So Friday, the last day of work, right? I could not go to sleep that night. So I was laying in bed at 3 a.m. and I'm watching stupid crap on my TV in my bedroom, on YouTube. And then I noticed the sun's rising. I'm like, great. I've been up for 24 hours at this point, because I used to wake up at 5 a.m. It's I've been up for 24 hours. This is great. So I'm like, I'll put something on that'll hopefully put me to sleep. And I picked this movie because I saw that it was on Amazon. I'm like, from what I hear, this movie's pretty bad. Hopefully it'll put me to sleep. Nope, I didn't go to sleep at all. It kept me up because of how awesome it was. And that is The Witch. So this is from, was it Second Sight? I think it's Second Sight. Yeah, Second Sight, which is in England. And they do the same thing that Arrow does, where they release a limited edition version of a movie that they've gotten the rights to. And then once that sells out, they'll release a standalone, just the movie version. Well, I needed to get this. So I actually missed out on it the first time. And it turns out that I think they had extra copies available. And I ended up finding that, they put a thing saying, we have more copies of The Witch if anyone wants it. And I jumped on it because I did not want to have to pay aftermarket prices for it. So it's a horror movie, but it's one of those real slow burn horror movies where it's things don't really look like they're going anywhere. And then once you realize what's been going on the whole time, it's one of those moments. And then shit just starts ratcheting up until you get a crazy ass conclusion. And I love it. So this is also the first time I ever saw Anya Taylor-Joy in anything. And I was after I saw this movie, I was she's going places. That girl's going to be huge. And guess what? She kind of is. It takes place in the late 1800s. There's a village it's in America, when all the immigrants had come over. There's this village. They kick this family out for not believing in what they believe in religiously. So they kind of live on the outskirts of the town. So it's a father, a mother, who are both on Game of Thrones. They have 3 kids. There's Anya Taylor-Joy. There's her younger brother, who's probably 5 years younger than her. And there's a newborn baby. And Anya Taylor-Joy is sitting outside the house dealing with the baby. The baby's laying on the ground, and she's tickling the baby and keeping it company. The Witch of the North? No, sorry. And she gets distracted for 3 seconds by her brother, so she kind of looks away. And then when she looks back, the baby's gone. There are rumors that there is a witch that lives in the forest surrounding where they live, and the witch eats babies. And this event of the baby disappearing drives the family absolutely crazy. They think their younger son is possessed. and they think that their daughter is a witch, and all this crazy shit just starts happening. It just keeps on, like I said, escalating and escalating and escalating until you get this crazy ass ending where I'm like, holy shit, this is so freaking rad. And I absolutely love that. I could not take my eyes away from that television. And I was like, man, I wish I did fork up the money to see this on the big screen because I missed out. So, and also, I bought this movie probably 3 times on home video. So I had a Blu-ray of it, which I never watched. I bought it. It was still sealed. Then a 4K came out. So when I first started actively collecting for 4K, I was like, definitely need to get The Witch because that way that movie is shot, it would definitely benefit from the HDR to bring in all the blacks and the whites because it's filmed kind of like starkly. Like, it's kind of like monotone, so that's going to work great. So I'm like, I'll get the 4K. So I sold off my Blu-ray, bought this 4K. It was dirt cheap. I think I got it for $5. And then this came out. And then I was like, damn it, I just bought a 4K of it. Shit. I'm like, well, I was watching a couple of YouTube channels, which is how I found out about this thing's existence. So it was like Serial at Midnight. And at the time it was Films at Home. Now it's just called Jeff Rossio, his channel. And they both talked about how the director did not approve the transfer that's on that 4K that I bought originally. But he had hands-on when it came to this one. Like, he was there supervising it the whole time. This is his, like, official transfer. Like, he gave the thumbs up and the approval to it. I'm like, I'm going to get that. So got rid of that other copy of The Witch that I had and bought this. So you got the movie and a Blu-ray with all the extras on it. You got a bunch of lobby cards here that all are branded with The Witch. And that whole thing with the goat, holy shit. Got a whole bunch of pictures of the characters and whatnot. I'm not going to take these up because they're impossible to get back in the way this ribbon is that's on here. And shit, I just dropped it. But one of the big things is it came with a freaking hardcover novel that is all about the making of the movie. And it is, I do believe, written by the director. Jesus, I can't even open it. Like, it is a novel that is just all about the making of the film and all that. I need to sit down and read that shit. And I'm going to leave it out because I'm going to forget about that card that I dropped. Anyway, absolutely love that movie. Just blew my freaking mind. Eggers. His last name is Eggers. Nathan Eggers or something like that, I think is the name of the guy who directed it. Nathan, I think it's Nathan Eggers. And then we have these 2 sets, which is the final thing I'm going to be talking about tonight. Thank you, because my throat is so freaking dry. These 2 X-Men sets. We got the X-Men Beginnings trilogy and the X-Men 3 film collection. So I'll go by, I have these on the shelf by order of the films. So I got the Beginners trilogy, which actually was made after this trilogy. These are the prequel X-Men movies that deal with all the characters when they were young. So you've got young Professor X, who is like a adopted brother to Mystique, who is Jennifer Lawrence. And when Professor X first meets Magneto and creates the X-Men for the first time ever back in the 1960s. And I absolutely love that one. That is called X-Men First Class. And I love it. I think it is so much fun. It was one of the first movies I saw theatrically after I got my job that I currently have. Because I had lost my job for about 4 months. I was unemployed for like 4 months back in 2011. And like the stress of it, like my friends were, thank you for my friends, because they were always trying to take me out to keep my hopes up and my spirits up, because I was in like a dark place when those 4 months, like it was bad. So one of the first movies I saw with them was Fast Five, and then this. And like I had such a blast watching First Class. I was like, I don't know what they could possibly do with this, because I didn't think it could get any better than X2. But I was wrong. I absolutely love First Class. I thought all the actors they cast were perfect. Jennifer Lawrence, I didn't know who the hell Jennifer Lawrence was at the time. She was a nobody. This is like her first big movie. And like I thought she was great, and I was like, that girl's going places. The first time I ever saw Michael Fassbender in a movie, he plays Magneto. I'm like, he's great. First time I'd seen James McAvoy and stuff before. He was probably the only person I was really familiar with. But like Zoe Kravitz is in this. It was like her first big movie. It's just so much fun. The soundtrack is awesome. Absolutely love it. So that was a pretty big hit. So we get X-Men Days of Future Past, and that's the one where I lost my freaking mind over because it was going to combine the old movies and the new movies. So it's a really popular story from X-Men comics. I think they even did it on the animated TV show. I can't remember. But it's where, like, in the future, all mutants are hunted by Sentinels. Professor X and Magneto, like, hatch this plot to, like, go back in time and try to stop it from ever happening, from this future from ever happening. So Wolverine is sent back in time to inhabit his younger self and contact all of the people who, are in the X-Men in the 1970s at that point and try to stop this apocalypse thing from happening. And it's so much fun. But I do recommend watching the Rogue cut instead of the theatrical cut because it is a way better version of the movie. But it's still a great movie no matter what. That one's awesome. You get Patrick Stewart playing Professor X again, which I love. I love Patrick Stewart. I think he's a fantastic actor. And Ian McKellen playing Magneto again, which is awesome because he's awesome as well. And then that was a huge hit. So, of course, we get another one, and that is X-Men Apocalypse. And that is the one where I think the movies kind of took a turn because they brought back Bryan Singer, who directed the original 2 X-Men movies with Hugh Jackman, to direct Days of Future Past, and he knocked that one out of the park. And they brought him back to do Apocalypse, and you could tell he was kind of done with X-Men because there was no energy to anything in that movie. It is a bunch of repeated scenes from other movies. They had to repeat the scene with Quicksilver from Days of Future Past, just with a different song and a different scenario, but it's the exact same thing. The bad guy is non-threatening, even though he's supposed to be one of the biggest bad guys they've ever had. He's just kind of like, and the way he looks too, is just talks in this soft voice. Hey guys, I'm going to murder the world kind of thing. And he looks like Ivan Ooze from the original Power Rangers movie. And it's just like a lot of cool things are introduced, but it just kind of has no energy to it at all. So when we saw it in the theater, me and my friends, when we walked out, they were like, yeah, it was okay. And I was just like, how does a movie that has the biggest villain in all of the X-Men lore, or one of the biggest villains in X-Men lore, how is it so slow? Like, I don't get it. So I was not a fan. Turns out the next one is the one everybody hates. I like. But it's not in this set. But I have it separately, so I'll talk about that when I get there. But 2 out of 3 movies in this, awesome. And it's the same kind of thing here, where you've got the original series, which is X-Men, X2, and then X-Men Last Stand, where I like the first 2 movies and I don't like the third one. First movie is one of the things that kicked off it started with Blade, kicking off superhero movies in a big way. And that led the way to X-Men because they're like, hey, if Blade, which is like a no-namer character that no one really is familiar with, can make that kind of money theatrically, what if we did that with the X-Men? So we'll give them a limited budget and see how that works out. And it made a killing and kicked off the big boom of superhero movies because that came out in 2000, and then the 2000s were just filled with them from that point on. Made a star out of Hugh Jackman. Perfect casting all the way around. Everybody. Halle Berry kind of... she's never really given anything to do in these movies except stand around and go like, but I love Anna Paquin as Rogue. I love Patrick Stewart as Professor X. I love Ian McKellen as Magneto. Famke Janssen as Jean Grey. Great. James Marsden, another character who was given the shaft in these movies. Good actor picked him, James Marsden as Cyclops, but they gave him nothing to do in these movies except act like a douche. But first movie's great. Second movie's even better. It's kind of like Spider-Man 2, where it was kind of repeating what the first movie did, but did it like 10 times better. I just absolutely love everything about it. It's like another one of those perfect comic book movies. I absolutely love it. Introduced Nightcrawler effect. That whole scene in the White House at the beginning of X2 is fantastic. Although high def kind of does ruin X2, in one way. So the scene at the very end that takes place in the dam when all the characters are looking for Professor X, who's like now killing humans because Stryker has convinced him that he's actually helping the humans, but he's actually killing them because he's got them brainwashed. They find out all the kids that had been kidnapped from the school that Stryker has been holding are like in this room underneath the ground where all the characters are standing. and they can kind of see them through a grate. So Nightcrawler's like, hey, I can, teleport down there to get them and bring them back up one at a time. And they're like, okay, fine. So you see a shot of all the kids in that, under the grate in that subflooring, right? And they show them standing there, and in the background, it is like all darkness. And I remember seeing it theatrically. You didn't see anything in that darkness. But with HD, you can see that Nightcrawler's already standing there before he's teleported. He's hiding in the darkness, and he's just waiting for the cue from the director to step out into the light. And it ruins the whole scene now because HD ruins everything. So you see him standing there already, and you hear bamf, and then you see him step forward. I'm like, really, guys? Really? You couldn't even fix this with the HDR when you'll make everything darker? Like, what the hell? But it's a freaking awesome movie. And then there's The Last Stand. Bryan Singer was going to come back to do it, but they didn't want to give him the time to do it properly. So he quit and went and made Superman Returns, which is terrible, if you ask me. And they brought in Brett frickin' Ratner, the guy that made all the Rush Hour movies, who is a hack and is also like a sexual predator who has been like ousted from Hollywood. He is terrible. I hate everything he does. And when I heard that they were bringing him in, I was like, well, this franchise is over. And they basically gave him 9 months to make a giant effects-filled movie that would have normally cost probably $175 million to make if they had the amount of time they needed to do it properly. But because they rushed everything, it cost $250 million, which is nuts. And I read the script before the movie even got made. The script leaked online, and I read it at work at my old job. And I was like, this is what? Like in the original script, everything that's in The Last Stand was in that script, but there was more. Wolverine was having like a fling with Storm in it. And I was like sitting there going like, wow, this is kind of like Halle Berry going, I have an Oscar now. I need more screen time. So they worked in this whole bunch of sex scenes between her and Wolverine that served no purpose to the story other than the fact that she gets more screen time now. Like there's a lot of stuff that had to do with Storm that had nothing to do with the plot. It was basically Halle Berry saying, I want more screen time kind of shit. The whole thing of Professor X dying was in there, and Cyclops just kind of dying and being forgotten about. It's all in there. And I was like, this is terrible. Like this movie's going to suck. So when it got released, a good chunk of my relatives from Italy who barely spoke English were visiting us. So we were trying to figure out what to do with them while they were here because my parents, especially my father, is a huge procrastinator. And the more you tell him to do something, the less he would want to do it. So we're sitting there going, you need to come up with a fucking plan for things to do with the relatives when they come, because they're not going to sit around the house all goddamn day like you want them to. Because my dad was also a huge cheapskate, and he did not like spending money if he didn't have to. And you're going to have to spend some money when they're here because it's expected. It's only polite. So, like, we got to come up with a plan. Didn't come up with a fucking plan. I ended up coming up with the plan. So we ended up taking him to, like, this big mall, this huge mall that we have here near Chicago. It was one of the biggest malls. It's like the second biggest mall, I guess, after the one that's in Minnesota. We took them there all day long. They wanted to go in every freaking shop. They loved it. They were having a blast. I was bored out of my mind, but I'm like, I don't care as long as they're having fun. I don't care. My dad wanted to take them to fucking Arby's for lunch. And I'm like, nope. And I said, hey, look, there's a sushi buffet here in the mall. And every one of them goes, sushi? And my dad looks at me, he goes, I hate your guts. Because he knew he was going to be paying like $300, $400 for food. I'm like, what did you expect was going to happen? But they loved it. And then we're like, what are we going to do tonight after the mall? Because the mall took up the whole day, which was great. It was like perfect thing for them to do. What are we going to do tonight? And then I just kind of offhand mentioned, well, I have tickets to go and see the new X-Men movie tonight. And every one of them goes, X-Men, especially my cousin Franco, R.I.P., who was a comic book artist, who was obsessed with all that stuff, goes, oh yeah, X-Men 3 is opening in the U.S. before it opens in Italy. We could see it here and go back to Italy and brag about that we've seen it and they haven't. And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, Dad, they want to go and see X-Men tonight with me and my buddy Charlie. And he looks at me and goes, I hate your guts. So we ended up buying tickets for everybody, and it ended up costing almost $200 for everybody to get tickets. But they fucking loved it. But I'm sitting there going, I've read all this in the script before. This sucks. I hate this so much. But the score is awesome. I love the music in the movie, but this sucks. The franchise is dead. But they were like, they lost their minds. They were screaming and shit and pointing at the screen and like, no, Cyclops. I'm like, he never got any development in any of these movies. They wasted that character. What are you cheering for? Or what are you crying for? Like, this is dumb. Professor X, I could see them crying over when he got killed, but and then the whole like Wolverine stabbing Jean Grey at the end, I was like, but they loved it, so whatever. So not a big fan of it at all. Long-winded story to say I hate it. But luckily the franchise did not end because X3 did end up making like a huge amount of money. I think it basically broke even, but it showed that there was still interest in the franchise. If they can cut the money down in the next one, it'd probably be okay, which is what they did with First Class by bringing in all new stars that did not cost $10 million to hire for their movie, like Halle Berry and Hugh Jackman. So that was a good move. But I love X-Men 1 and X2. Last Stand can eat a dick. And that's it for tonight. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Holy shit, tomorrow I'm not going to be able to speak at all. Fantastic. Anyway, thanks everybody for coming and hanging out with me tonight. I really appreciate it. Retro Coop and Peter, thank you. I saw people coming and going as we went, but nobody said anything in the chat, so I don't know who they were. Sorry. But I can't believe you disliked Last Stand so much. I beyond dislike it. I like the score. I listen to the score all the time, but I do not like that movie. I do not like what they do with any of those characters in it. The way that they ruin Jean Grey, the whole Dark Phoenix storyline, and it's just like it boils down to her walking around like a zombie until somebody looks at her funny. She goes, bah! Ruined it. Anyway, so I'll be back next Thursday with the first installment of my single film 4K collection. But this Saturday, starting at probably 6:30 p.m. Central, I'll be streaming the next episode of my Dungeons & Dragons campaign, Tides of Flame, on Twitch. So twitch.tv/statblock20 at 6:30 p.m. Central. So episode 16 is going to be streamed live there, and then eventually I'll upload it to my YouTube channel here. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We just released a new episode of the Movie is Starting podcast on Monday, which was Killer Clowns from Outer Space with one of the unofficial third hosts of the podcast, Jason Deichler, which was a lot of fun. And we're bringing back his trilogy of episodes. So he has 3 episodes this season, which we did, I do believe, in the second season of the, now I got the burps, of the podcast. And we call it the Intel Trilogy because that's his DJ name. So we call it the Intel Trilogy Strikes Back. And part 1 was released on Monday. So if you want to check that out, youtube.com/the movie is starting. Has 2 H's. So check that out. And then we'll release another episode, and not this upcoming week, but the week after. So in 2 weeks. So thank you, everyone, once again for hanging out with me. I'll be back Thursday at 8:30 p.m. Central for the next Film Collection 2024 stream. Talk to you later. Have a nice night, everybody. Stay safe out there. Chris of Midlife Crisis Media out.